But to be honest, that kind of fits my vibe, so I loved it. I literally was like, my gosh, I have a trailer. Yeah, I had a freaking trailer. Yeah, I did. Yeah, so for this seminar, I had a trailer. Pepper can't believe it either. So it's incredible. So yeah. I've never had a trailer for a team coaching seminar. Last week, I had a quick play coaching session, and now I have like an official seminar. It's incredible. Why do patrons not get the seminar treatment? Because you guys are not important. You're small little underlings. Okay. Let's get this replays code set up here. We'll get started in just a minute. Malevolence, I don't know what y'all guys have for time, but I'm thinking like hour and a half, maybe a little longer, depending on how questions go, if that works for y'all.
Yeah, absolutely. Generally, we try to, cap it at 2 hours max because we have a very questionist group here.
That's fine.
But, whenever you're like, okay, this is good. I'm a little bit tired, whatever.
Sure. When I'm bored of you, mediocre little random citizens, and I have more important things to do, like saving the world and orphans and stuff like that. I don't even look at that quick play record, guys. It's not important. Then I will let you guys know. But I'm sure I will be happy to run over here. We'll start off by me kind of sniffing around here and seeing what codes we have. We've got some dive stuff here in Jib. That's going to be awesome. Let's keep looking here. I'm going to look through what Mayhem sent me. Shambali. I see some variety of element teams representation. We love that. So love what you guys have been doing and excited to be taking a look here. Look at some more congested, pokey, brawly stuff. Looks like more like pokey stuff. It's good. And then King's Row, Scrim's Row. Wow, we got the full cornucopia here. I love that. Is there Lucio? Please tell me it's Lucio. Oh my gosh, guys, we have freaking Lucio. I'm so excited. Okay, good enough. All right. Well, just because it's fitting with my reputation, we're going to leave my quick play record up during my introduction. Ladies and gentlemen, my name is Spilo. I have been coaching for 7 years, longer than most of you guys have been alive. Started off as a miserable bronze player with no first-person shooter experience. From there, I went into some content coaching just because I've always enjoyed coaching. I used to coach mixed martial arts. I've coached sports. I've taught mathematics. I've done a lot of different teaching aspects. So everything I've done, I've enjoyed teaching. And so coaching Overwatch, watching Overwatch League Season 1, I really was like, man, I want to be one of those overpaid, worthless Overwatch League coaches myself. And so I started working Overwatch as part-time, whether it's with streaming or coaching random diamond teams and then masters teams and then grandmaster teams and then tier 3 teams and contenders teams and sweating and crawling my way all the way up into the Overwatch League with the London Spitfire for 2 seasons. And then decided that I kind of was done with my professional career from then on. Really haven't pursued professional team coaching since then, but still do professional analysis, as well as obviously a lot of individual coaching, game design critiques, and the like. So glad to be here. Some of y'all's names I know. Some of y'all's names I wish I didn't know, but that's irrelevant. And we're going to be jumping in today. So today we're going to be talking a little bit about the concept of win conditions. And if you guys don't know my reputation, I'm the angle guy. I don't think I take any claim as to being the guy that invented off angles by any means, but I think I've done a pretty good job of bringing off angles and map control to the Western macro light, certainly for the casual audience, and I like to think even at the professional level as well. It's been something that I've pushed for a lot, not because angles are the only thing that matters, but because it's the thing that I think the West has been a lot behind in terms of understanding, whether it's with dive, poke, or brawl. And we're going to be deconstructing some of y'all's concepts of what tempo means, what map control means, what win conditions mean, and more importantly, I kind of want to go over Malevolent's message here Mayhem's message here, because I think we're going to start with what you guys wanted out of the seminar, and I'm going to use that as a springboard to start talking about topics. So we're going to hit on topics. Let's take a look here. I took a look at the Christopher seminar, which, by the way, if you guys haven't seen that, highly recommend. Very, very good. We're going to be going over win conditions, how to identify them based on what your enemy is playing. And then I think the trailer does a really good job delving into like the poke, the dive, the brawl, and some ridiculously, hilariously, and beautifully done analogies with music, which I greatly appreciated. And we're going to jump in really quick here. So I'm going to give a couple of provocative statements to start this off. And I'm going to back up these statements with some review time here. And I'm going to go and start right now. So the first things first is that every composition has to start with map control. Every composition has to start with map control. I don't think that's as provocative as you guys might think, okay? But we're going to keep going here, okay? In terms of win conditions, you always start with space control, Okay, that's another provocative one. And this is the real provocative one. You guys ready for this one? The Brawl, dive, poke, win condition, different compositions playing for different win conditions is 95% horse manure. They all function almost the exact same. You heard that right. Almost every composition plays to win in the exact same manner. The only exception to that rule is speed. So if you're running a composition with speed, there is an additional layer to how you take fights. I think Christopher talks about this a great deal, but we're going to be talking more about that. Yes, Rio, we're going to be talking a great deal about lane theory. So the whole concept of dive versus poke versus brawl, I want you to wrap that up into a little, like an aluminum foil, crumple it up and throw it away and never think about it again, because it is absolutely false, it's misleading, and it's not going to make you a better player in ranked, nor is it going to make you a better player in scrims. So we're going to jump in really quick here, and I'm going to kind of we'll start off with the easy low-hanging fruit. We're going to start off with Gibraltar here as kind of, make sure I've got the right Gibraltar here. I think this is it. As kind of our backdrop for how to explain this. So Christopher used Microsoft Paint. I will probably be using Microsoft Paint as well at some point. But we'll start off with some real-time analysis. Now, the first thing we're going to talk about is I'm going to talk about my claims that every composition plays in the exact same manner. I want you guys to picture Ashe versus Cassidy. I'm going to ask a lot of questions while providing the answers, but the questions are legitimate, and I challenge you guys to put at least a couple seconds thought into answering them yourselves. How does an Ashe beat a Cassidy? Is it tempo? Is it proximity? Is it slow? Is it fast? Okay? The answer is, the first answer, the obvious answer, well, it's a question of range. Like an Ashe beats a Cassidy by poking him down from range. If a Cassidy closes the gap on Ashe, the victory will go most of the time to the Cassidy just because of his weapon, his kit, his lack of scope. I mean, just everything with Cassidy just feels better up close. It doesn't mean that Ashe cannot win up close, but it's much more unlikely that that's going to happen. Well, let's keep going with that. How does a Reinhardt beat a Sigma? Okay, again, the same answer, right? You close the gap. Sigma wants to whittle down the Reinhardt, chip some of the HP down. What about a Lucio versus a Zenyatta? Lucio has a gun, right? So no, well, Zenyatta's gun is better at range. And so it's not about fast versus slow. And if any of you guys are fans of my content, you know that I despise those terms. It's not about fast versus slow. It's about range. It's about proximity of the characters. Now, the problem with Overwatch for a lot of people is that they look at these high-level teams like Twisted Minds, Islecad, even going all the way back to Overwatch 1 with the speed, disengage, and they see how these teams are able to layer ultimates and orchestrate fight plans, and they say, okay, it's about tempo. It's about pushing your advantage and fast, and that's all fine, and those things are very important in certain situations. But everything in Overwatch, whether it's in a 1v1, 2v2, 3v3, 4v4, 5v5, 6v6 even, comes from a focus of space control and playing your effective range. So let me ask you guys another question. Who wins, Bastion or Reaper? So your first and obvious question is, well, doesn't it depend on range? Like, I know the answer to this, right? Like, Bastion's got probably a little bit more of a range. You know, he can poke him down with Reaper. But there's probably one other factor that all of a sudden you started to pay attention to, which is that, oh my, wait a second. Does Bastion have turret form? Now, maybe after the recent buff, it doesn't matter because Bastion's still OP. But usually the question is, does Bastion have the cooldown that makes him very effective at winning every trade? In fact, Bastion is one of the most powerful cooldown characters in the game and one of the weakest without it. Here's another question. Who is a better tank in a trade? And I'm not just saying in a 1v1, but in a general 5v5 trade, Winston or Diva? Again, we have a very important asterisk, right? Winston versus Diva, who's got better poke? Well, I don't know. They're both pretty good up close, maybe Diva technically, but it's not really about their range difference. It's about, and this is the important use of the term, tempo. Tempo is the timing, okay? The music, the timing with which a character holds peak relevancy. If you guys have heard the Korean term, the turn, this is what tempo really is. And so when people say we need faster tempo, that doesn't make any sense. You cannot make Winston's bubble come back faster than it already is. Now, you might argue that by faster tempo, they mean something else, but that's my argument, is that term isn't very accurate. What you should be focusing on is the synchronization of pressure cycles off of the person that has spikes of pressure. if you look at what's on our screen right now, you see a composition with anti-nade, you see a composition with recall, you see a composition with Winston bubble. So this composition looks to be more quote unquote tempo than maybe the counterpart. Because while things like dynamite, while things like boosters, while things like missiles are obviously on cooldowns as well, just understanding the power specs of the character, you understand that something like a Winston bubble is much more important to play against, to play around, to play with than anything that D.Va can provide. And that's basically how Overwatch works. It's a sequence of cycles of pressure that are attempt to be synchronized. And then if you get the synchronization, sometimes people get killed. That's very, very important because when we're talking about fast tempo versus slow tempo compositions, what we're not talking about, listen carefully, we're not talking about whether the character is speed, whether the character has a long distance weapon or not. When we're talking about fast tempo versus slow tempo compositions, we're talking about whether the character is reliant off of a big burst of value versus a continual drain of resources. This is why Sigma is often baited by people into thinking that he is a slow tempo character because he has a gun. That's not why Sigma is a slow tempo character. It's because Sigma, with the exception of Accretion, is not reliant off of his cooldowns in comparison to other tanks. His pressure is much more consistent. You guys ready for a really spicy take here? Juno, with the exception of Speed Ring, is not a tempo support. Now, the Speed Ring obviously is, but when Juno doesn't have Speed Ring, she doesn't really have a lot of burst value in comparison to a lot of the other supports, even with torpedoes. So what you're looking for is when you're playing a composition, the number one thing we're going to talk about today before we even talk about angles is timing. And so when you're the red composition, you want to synchronize your pressure with your Winston's bubble. Now, let me ask you another question. This is going to be a bait question. Most of you guys that have worked with me know the answer to this one. When Winston applies pressure with his bubble, what does a dive composition need to do at the same time? So I'm going to give you guys just a couple seconds. I don't need an answer. I'm not even reading chat. I'm just going to give you guys a couple of seconds to think about that. Now, the obvious answer, and this is where a lot of our Overwatch 1 mindset comes into play, and it wasn't accurate then, and it isn't accurate now. And the concept is that dive plays to isolate and kill a single target. If you think that, you are wrong. The good news is it's a lot less complicated than that. It's a lot simpler. You see, the way the game is played at the high level, and honestly, even in Diamond Ranked, is people are going to control multiple different angles. So in this particular situation here, if we're looking to dive and isolate Kiriko Brigitte, well, good freaking luck. Because not only do those characters have get out of jail free cards in some aspects, but every single approach for my Tracer, for my On-a-Nade, for my Sojourn angle is going to likely be contested. So if you're going for the same target, you're never going to get a dive off by the traditional term. So what a dive is, what tempo really is, what we need to be doing off of our big cooldown trade is simply taking an angle, taking space, whether that's pushing cart, opening an angle to poke backline, rotating to top. Basically, an action has to be tied to the bubble, but what the action is almost irrelevant. Almost irrelevant. As long as we're doing something that improves our positioning or our position to win the fight, then taking action off of the bubble is the only thing that matters. And the difference between dive and brawl and poke, if you really want a win condition, is that dive has much more mobile characters usually that can control different wider angles of the map because they have more mobile characters. That's basically it. When you put more sugar in cake, it doesn't change the fact that it's still a cake. It just makes it sweeter. And the way Overwatch works is that it's always a cake. It just might be a salty cake. It might be a sweet cake. It might be a bitter cake, but it's still a cake. And so the ingredients of Brawl, Dive, and Poke all function in the same rules of timing and taking the map control, but they just have different emphases on different things. And for Dive, it's just opening angles a bit wider. As long as we're synchronizing your pressure at the same time, we're good to go. So here's another question here. If you're Team Blue here, do you also have tempo as well? I mean, we definitely deconstructed it as like red is the big one because bubble is important, right? We need to be. So for Team Blue, do we not have any cooldown cycles that matter? And if the answer is yes, then how do we communicate that? How do we get our tempo for our pressure correctly done? Now, some of you may feel like, well, I don't know. Let me ask you guys a question. Maybe some of you guys remember my Kaluge review on Circuit Royale from, man, it must have been 3 years ago, the Sigma. You guys remember that? So let's talk about if Dive is a tempo composition and other compositions are not. We just described Sigma as being a little bit less tempo, right? If you guys remember that review, One of the key takeaways when I was going through it is how Kaluj, and all top Sigma teams did this, would always synchronize his peaks, not his dives, because Sigma doesn't close the gap, but his peaks with pressure from an off angle or his snipers or his backline. So even a Sigma composition, the most untempo, cooldown consistent, especially with that minor perk with the kinetic grasp, this guy has just always got his cooldowns available, and yet even the elite Sigma compositions were synchronizing their peaks as if they were playing Winston dive, as if there was a Mei wall that they were pushing off of. And so you've noticed something here that whether you're playing a tempo-oriented composition or something a little bit more blasé, your timing of your peaks, the timing of your pressure matters. And so the question is then who calls that timing? Does my diva call the peaks? Does my Ashe when she's opening up an angle? Maybe if I was running this with an Ana and my Ana wants to look for nade, and the answer is it doesn't matter. As long as we're applying pressure at the same time, it doesn't matter who calls it, who calls the peaks, as long as we're doing it at the same time and applying pressure in the way that makes the most sense. Now, and this is going to be my final important point before we start to analyze this match. What we're going to do is we're going to be breaking down a couple of non-ult fights and looking at ultimate fights, and then we'll go from there. The final point then is how do you position with Brawl? How do you position as dive? How do you position as poke? So we've got our tempo. Our Winston's going to dive. What should my Tracer be doing? Where should my Ana Brigitte be? Where should my Sojourn be? And the answer is, it depends. It depends, but it's not, it depends on the situation, the comp. No, it does not depend on that whatsoever. Again, it's even simpler than that. It simply depends on what range your character is. So here's a question for you guys. What type of angle or lane does my Ashe like? How would you describe the architecture that favors an Ashe? Okay, obvious answer there, right? Bit of range, bit of cover, longer sightline, obvious. Okay, what about what type of angle or lane or range does the diva prefer? Well, close, right? So either threatening a dive or denying an angle, or we'll talk about objective later, but yes, denying objective as well. What about Kiriko? What about Brigitte? What about Tracer? What about Winston, Ana, Brig, Sojourn? See, what you start to do is when you talk about how your composition should position, you don't start to overthink the matchup or the style of composition. Well, we're playing hybrid, so we're going to put no. You simply plug the character's effective range and mobility into the angle that they need to be. So if we let this fight devolve, the question of where Sojourn should be, where Ana should be, is obvious. We want a sightline. Where should my Tracer be? Well, obvious. Now, some of you guys might go, well, then why is my Tracer in cart? Like, why is Tracer good in cart? Okay, that's a very good question. It's actually something that I was thinking about when I was watching the Christopher session, and it actually makes a lot of sense. If you guys remember that session, Zarya, Ram, Tracer, a lot of short-range characters were forcing objective. And this one I actually want an answer for. I'm actually going to tab over and check chat. I want you guys to tell me, why did those characters prioritize objective? Why is objective so important for a character like Tracer and Winston or Diva? Why is it important for those characters? They can duel and live. Sure. Why? Okay, here's a really important question. What's the effective range of the characters that usually force cart? Think about it, right? Really, really dumb. Short, right? So why does the short range character good at forcing cart? Well, because if you want to start, think about the new Queen Street, right? We'll pull it up probably later, actually, because I really like using a couple of pro codes. But the reason why is because to stop the objective, you have to go into their effective range. So when we see Chris talking about objective, or you see these teams forcing the objective, they're forcing an angle. They're forcing the angle. The cart is the angle. They are forcing people into their effective range if they want to stop the objective. And an objective is very important in Overwatch. The whole reason that we take these angles, we take these maps, is so that we can continue to move the objective. And so what you do is you force, whether it's Reinhardt and ranked, right? Ryan's ranked, your team's clearing height. How are you going to stop the Ryan? Well, you got to walk into his face, right? And so these highly mobile short-range characters are really good at forcing cart because the only way to stop them is to walk into them. And so that's essentially what we're looking for here. So we're going to take a look really quick here. I don't know what rank, do you know, Malevolence, what rank this lobby is here, approximately?
I believe this lobby's around Plat.
Okay, Plat, perfect. Okay. So we're going to be a little critical here, and it's not because I expect the world from Plat players. These guys are, I'm sure, doing a great job, and I'm glad that we're actually take a look here. But we're going to use this as a springboard to talk about some pretty advanced concepts. So if I'm being a little harsh, it's not a big deal. So first things first, let's actually pause right as we get our Winston dive here, because he's looking for it. Okay, so pause. What do we think about our staging, our angling, our positioning? Is every single person right now in a position that they like? Effective range. Let's look at our Tracer. Okay, she's trying to close the gap. Respect it. Winston, closing the gap. Sojourn, opening an angle. Let's look at our Ana. No. Now, let me ask you guys a question. Do you think this is a problem of positioning, or do you think this is a problem of tempo or timing? Feels like the answer is obvious, right? I think my Ana is en route, but isn't there yet. And so it's not the end of the world if she's rotating during that dive, but I don't feel like there's any urgency in getting here. We should have been here 15, 20 seconds ago. And then once we were here, we could then prioritize on capitalizing off of our Winston dive. Now, whether that's a nade or shots or healing, it doesn't really matter, but this is just too slow. Now, this is going to be really, really important for you support players out there. Who else is the fraud right now? I'm being hard on support players, shockingly. Who else is the fraud right now? This one I do want an answer for. What about Brigitte, Ria asks. What about Brigitte? What about Brigitte? We're focusing on Team Red right now, but we could probably break down Team Blue. Right. Why is my Brigitte here? This is not a passive-aggressive question. This is a legitimate question. What's the purpose of Brigitte in this composition? What's the purpose of Brigitte? What's the purpose of main support? What's the purpose of Lucio? What's the purpose of protecting Ana? Okay, good. Keep going. Play close, not far if she's defending Ana. Good. Okay. Denying space. Good, good. Assisting Ana. Good, 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 good. Let me ask you guys a question. When we're denying our Ana from a threat that is 40 meters away, what the frick are we doing? Again, I know I'm being way too harsh in this player. I do the same stuff myself, but again, I'm just using this as a springboard. Why are we here? The purpose of Lucio, the purpose of Brigitte is to, with the anticipation, listen carefully, with the anticipation of somebody closing the gap on you, your job is to deny that gap being closed, thereby giving your close range skirmish support playstyle value. However, if there is nothing closing the gap on you, and there is no threat of closing the gap on you, it is your job to close the gap on the enemy team and either to pocket your tank or deny the angle from even being taken in the first place. And so one of the worst things that a support player can do, especially a support player like Brigitte or Lucio, is to fail to close the gap when that lane is not being threatened. Now, I know it seems like all of a sudden, why are we talking about like main support? Like what? Because remember, what did we start this conversation about? We started about win cons by taking lanes, playing to your effective range. You pick your character to control a certain range, and you plug them into that range. That's it. And so if my Brigitte is holding here, it is because I expect there to be multiple angles with which to close the gap on my Ana, and I need to stay. If that is not the case, I have to play my effective range. Today's conversation is about angle control and effective range, because that is the win condition of Overwatch 95% of the time. We'll talk about speed in a little bit, but the TLDR, just to kind of close those questions down, is that speed is not used to fight in situations with push-pull. Speed is often used to just completely disengage fights entirely. You forfeit your opportunity to win fights by disengaging fights entirely. I know some of you guys, but what about pushing with speed? We'll get to that. That doesn't involve compromising angle control, though. So for right now, this looks good for Soj, Winston, Tracer, but my Ana has to rotate tempo. My Brigitte has to close the distance, effective range. Does that make sense? This is how dive is played. This is how brawl is played. This is how poke is played. It doesn't matter. Every composition is controlling different angles. The descriptive of wide versus narrow is the descriptives that I like to use. I don't like to say a comp that controls angles and a comp that doesn't control angles, because that is false, even from teams like Team M and Alcad. The difference is how wide are those angles being controlled and what type of angles are being controlled. So here's another question, guys. Again, for those of you that know the answer, this may be easy. Why is Ana Brig played so much? Why is Kiri Brig played so much? Why is Kiri Lucio? And why are those comps played so commonly? Why is it always Lucio Brigitte? Why is it always Lucio Brigitte? Some of you guys may know the answer to this one. So some I've talked about recently. Utility, good. What else? Lucio Brig is fun. That's true. I'm a big fan of Lucio Brigitte. Yeah. Peel potential, sure. Why? Are you saying to me that a Weeyang with Wave and Orb can't peel better than Brigitte? It's got the boop. It's got the heal. The amp is way more. Don't even say, oh, but Inspire and Pax are OP. No. Wave and Resource is way more OP in this situation. Way more OP. Even Suzu's better. Close range dueling potential, close angle control. Ah, you guys are so smart. Yeah, the concept is that if I was playing Wu Young in this situation, could I reliably control this angle here? I'm not talking about like in this little room here, what character is able to deny this angle right now and to do so reliably? Or to reliably deny people from closing the gap. So maybe the boop is a big factor there too. And there's only 2 characters, right? Brig, Lucio. Yeah, somebody said Ryan. I mean, yeah, actually, yes, Ryan. Yeah, I mean, so when we're talking about compositional construction, this is why you see So Tracer. This is why you see Kiri Lucio on a Brig, because you have a character that can do a boosh and a character that can get their hands dirty. You have a character that can force cart and a character that can open a sightline, because both are different angles. The way that map control works is you cannot all in, usually on most maps, not all maps, you cannot all in with 2 range supports or 2 range DPS. And if you ever see that, that's because either the map is very friendly for very open sightlines, or the characters that are ranged are just so completely overtuned. Case in point, Kiriko Wu Young recently, and so on. So you desperately need something that can control this space. So when we're playing Brigitte Lucio, and by the way, this is why Brig Lucio are perma-meta most of the time, is that it's just so hard to replace the utility of somebody that can test close range support. And until Overwatch introduces another character that can effectively brawl and provide value in these close ranges, you cannot play another combination of supports consistently. Does that make sense? Maybe you can on a new Queen Street. Maybe you can on a Circuit Royale. Maybe you can on a Junkertown First Point. But you have to have something that controls that space. The way Overwatch works is there's too many different types of angles and lanes. You can't just run double hit scan at the professional level. It's just why characters like Genji, Tracer, Venture, Reaper, and so on, even when they're overtuned, are not always run in tandem, because it just doesn't make sense most of the time to run 2 short-range DPS. This is why we've seen Freya and Sojourn, despite them being honestly not all that good. It's not just Quartz, it's really nice to have a long sight line too. Blizzard is addicted to range supports. Yes, that's been a major criticism of mine for a long time. I think that's why we've seen a lot of staleness with the variety, partly due to speed boost, but we'll also talk about that. So we're going to move ahead here. So I hope that you guys have kind of started to piece together what I'm looking for here. I'm looking for timing of our pressure at the same time, and then simply putting our characters, putting our chess pieces in the right place, okay? It's just simple as that, right? When you're playing chess, your rook does something, so you set it up to do that. Your pawn does something, so you set it up to do that. Your knight or your bishop, whatever, does something, so you put it in that. So all you're doing is you're simply plugging and playing your characters in different effective ranges. And the problem here is that, well, first off, we have a tempo problem. Tracer's probably doing too much without pressure from Winston, but also that we still don't have a support involved in the fight. And this is not going to be just about beating on our supports. This is also a timing problem, but I want to talk about supports because I think the way that our supports position is often the way that how you're playing the composition in terms of space control, right? We'll talk about Lucio in a little bit. Okay, so we're going to skip ahead a little bit. We're going to wait till we have an ultimate fight here. And just for variety's sake here, we're going to mix things up and we're going to flame the supports on the enemy team a little bit because that's what we do here. Now, really quick question. How should Team Blues set this up? Let's ignore the old economy for just a second. Let's just focus on the setup. What do you guys think right now? Let's let it cook a little bit. Do we have every character playing their effective range? Let's give it a second. Waiting. Okay, what do you guys think? Let's look at our Tracer. Is she playing her effective range? Sure. Diva? Yeah. This is great. This is really good for Diva. Good angle. Tracer's on cart. Again, we talked about good angle, but she can also go up top. That's fine. Does my Ashe have a sightline right now? Yeah, a little bit of a sightline. Now maybe she could greed a little bit further, but that's fine. That's fine right now. Now, some of you guys might be a little bit critical of my Brigitte here, but I actually think Brigitte is doing fine. Brigitte is controlling this space with her Diva, and she's very good at this. Now the question then is then what should my Kiriko be doing? Well, I think opening her sightlane with her Ashe is also fine as well. So honestly, not too shabby. Not too shabby. Now, if the roles were reversed, my Brigitte was standing here to deny Winston, that might be okay as well. But you notice that the Brigitte's job is always asking, it's the same thing as Lucio, where is the threat that's going to close the gap on me? And then actively trying to deny that threat, even if it means not stacking directly here. You see, the problem with this kind of space control here, now I know it's because of Disruptor Shot. What's the problem with this stack here? want you guys to think about it effectively in terms of space control. What has this allowed right now? Do you see it? Where can my Winston engage from for free? Right. So Winston gets the staging for free to jump height. Any pocket that my Tracer may or may not need for the 1v1 is also gone, dried up, whether it's from the Kiriko or Brigitte. But regardless of if we're on the perfect lane, there's no space control right now. And so if all it takes here is one anti-nade, one angle engaged from Nano Winston, and even just a pulse bomb, and things are cooked. So right now, it's really important right now that what my Brig is doing right now happens. Forcing the re, giving the pocket on the Tracer. And then now, oh no, we don't have the, maybe my Brigitte is not going to deny the Winston. It doesn't matter anymore, because whatever pincer approach that was there from the Tracer, that may have been there from an off-angle engage from the Winston, has now dried up. Because my Brigitte has denied the angle by simply, you ready for this? This really complicated concept of she simply pressed armor pack and then that denied the entire engage. It's really good. It's really good. How can this Winston engage now? Can he go through here? No. Too far, too compressed. D.Va's going to body block. Can he go from here? No. Whip shot, coach gun, not going to happen. Nowhere to go. Nowhere to go. And so if this whip happens, and it does, W supports. Pocket onto D.Va from Kiri, denial of Winston in here. And you notice that Brigitte was in here earlier because it's a smaller space, but then as soon as the Winston pivoted, she went and matched the Winston. Good stuff. This is beautiful. Nah, I love the bomb. I just love that bomb. I respect that so much. But that's really all that matters from our perspective. Now, let's keep going here, and let's just pick a random moment here. Now, some of you guys may ask, yeah, but what about ults? Neutral, neutral angle control, neutral, neutral angle control. Okay, let's talk about that. Let's go to a reset from this fight here. Yeah, let's go let's actually find a situation where we have some more relevant ultimates here. All right, let's no, I'm looking for a specific moment here. Sure, this is fine here. This OT fight's good. Okay. If your team red here, what's your fight plan? What's your fight plan? Final fight and first point's really good? Okay. What's your fight plan? Let me ask you guys a question. First things first. Do we like our staging right now? Let's ignore the OT for just a second. Right. So I'm not being super critical here. It's an OT. I understand it. What's my Winston going to do? Well, it's going to primal top, obviously. What's my Tracer going to do? Well, I don't know. Maybe force point. Who knows, right? Okay. All right, so this is the last thing we're going to talk about in terms of the designing your space, okay? And this is pretty high-level concept here. Who's going to get the gap closed on? If you're team red, who's going to get pressured? Who's going to get gap closed? Soj, right. So remember, this is really important. I just coached a champ Lucio this past week, and we talked obsessively about gap closing, right? Closing the gap or getting the gap closed on. And to understand this is a pretty high-level concept. You have to understand the old economy, okay? So right now, pre-fight, my Sojourn needs to ultimate. So right now, the number one goal for Team Blue is going to be gap closing onto red, right? They're going to need to go gap close. It might be Tracer, it might be Brigitte, it might be Kiriko, it might be Ashe, it might be D.Va, it might be anybody, but they're going to try to gap close. So if my name is Brigitte, I am the gap closer denier, and or I close the gap myself. So what does that mean for my positioning? Now, again, this is a heavy asterisk of the stress of an OT situation. So this is more of a conceptual thing. This is not a criticism right now. You see what I'm saying? Think about it. Think about it. So then all of a sudden, if my existence is only to peel for my Ana, what the frick am I doing? My Ana's not a priority right now. This is the priority right now. This is the angle. This is the lane that matters. Because if I could pocket this, we're going to win the game. And so this is exactly how layering works. If you've ever watched like some high-level Lucio gameplay in Symmetra mirrors, this is really common where you'll have your Lucio gap closing with a beat advantage. But if you're playing into a beat at disadvantage and your Soj has ult, you'll have a Lucio sit on their Sojourn and just expect TP and beat. And their only job is to boop that teleport and amp speed their Sojourn away. Why? Because is that what Lucio always does? No, no, no. Not when you have beat advantage. You need to gap close. But when you are the one that is going to get gap closed on, so it always comes back to range, guys. It always comes back to range. It always comes back to range. So right now, my Sojourn is not actively going to... And see, so this is really smart from Soul here. Hit scan players are always the smartest. That's what I've discovered. That's a joke. Anyway, but yeah, we basically wait to a moment where the gap cannot be closed on, and then we can actually apply pressure. You notice this? So all of a sudden, and by the way, this is where Brigitte's actually getting value. So I'm being critical of Brigitte because gap closing here. But in an OT situation, let me ask you guys a question. Remember what we said about overtime? What did we say about objective? Why is Tracer good on cart? Because they have to stop cart. Why is Brigitte good on cart and OT with help? Well, because they're going to have to stop cart. So you know what? Elemental, we've been beating on you over the head, but right now, you're going to get a lot of freaking value. There's not a single support that I would value more than Brigitte in this exact situation. There's not a single support. Bob throws, by the way. Right. But yeah, I mean, basically TLDR is that, like, even if that Bob had landed, you're cooking. We're fine. So, ironically, in many ways, the way that you guys played this one, it kind of worked out. Like, Diva goes to stop cart. Guess what? Brigitte swings. Brigitte inspires. Brigitte swings. So we've forfeited angle control for many of our Ana and Sojourn players. But we are playing our effective range with 1, 2, 3 characters here. We just don't have angle control. I say that, and then the Sigma Tracer player goes to flank. But yeah, this is good. This is fine. Okay, we're going to keep moving on. We're going to pivot over to the other side. We're going to go to defense here. And so basically, this is how it works. You play angles or lanes that are effective for your character's effective range. Then, using the ult economy during your fight plan, you decide what angles and lanes you want to play, because that may or may not change how you position yourself. Does that make sense? That's it. Let's ask another question here. Are we playing effective lanes with our characters right now? What do you guys think? Who's the fraud? Who's the fraud? Who's the fraud? Who's the freaking fraud right now? What the frick? I just complimented this guy. What are we doing, blood, right? So what can Tracer do in this situation? How can Tracer close the gap? My Tracer's kind of homeless. Co-side, maybe, yeah. A little bit more space control pressure to deny this lane, and then if there's nobody there, you can deepen, sure. But also, you could go objective here too. Like, regardless of whatever you do, whether it's the wide lane or the objective lane, it's more Tracer's effective range, and then that's fine. What about my Soj Brig? What about my Ana? What do you guys think? Brigitte's got her vision on here. Ana's got her vision on here. Now, maybe I can nitpick here and say maybe I would prefer things to flip. I think Ana going with Winston's usually fine, though. But to be honest with you guys, I think it's okay. I think it's okay. Maybe my Brigitte is thinking more about denying the angle here, in which case we could see a little bit more aggression. But this is honestly fine. Sojourn has a lane. Ana has a lane. Brigitte has a bit of a lane. It's okay. Yeah, you could close the gap with Winston there for sure. But I think the main thing here is that, like, Tracer didn't do anything, then Tracer used Blinks to commit, and then now Tracer's kind of fricked. So let's keep watching. Now let's look at things from Team Blue's perspective here. Remember, we've talked about this exact same situation before, right? What should my Brigitte do? What do you think, guys? What do you guys think? What do you guys think? That's not too bad. That's not too bad. We got to. It's scary. I'm not in a vacuum here. This area is very scary for Brigitte. It's very much a skill play, but I don't hate it. I don't hate it. Do you see what we did here? We closed the gap so we had a better angle to pocket our backline while also pocketing our Tracer. We hit our whip. We disengage. And we pull the resources away from our backline. What would have happened if King Scar had been here? How would the Winston have staged? The answer is easily, right? Easily. Drop, easy dive, cleave. Right? You have to be very careful with how you take spaces, Brigitte, and your mistakes will lead to your death. But this is exactly what we're looking for. It's cautious, closing the gap, denying the angle before it's a problem. So you have to be careful with this, but it's really, really important that we do this because Kara is just basically taking the mother load. Like they've just been nothing but pressure and pressure and pressure and pressure. And then now we have the opportunity to go forward from there. Now, let's take a careful look at what happened here. What should backline from blue do right now? What's the problem here? So we've talked about angle and lane control. Looks good. Looks good. Let's talk about tempo again. We've seen nade. We've seen bubble. Call animal control. You understand what I'm saying? There needs to be abuse from not just the Brigitte here, but from the Kiriko and Ashe. This guy needs to be severely punished. Now, why is it so important to kill Monkey here or push Monkey here? Think about it. Why is it so important to push Monkey here? Is it our job to kill Monkey all the time? No. What's our job? What space are we controlling right now? What angles do we have right now? What is going on? What is going? Look at the split right now. We've seen every cooldown. We must walk. We must punch because I need my Ashe here or I need my Ashe here. We must walk forward. If we do not walk forward, we are isolated. We have zero sightline control. And so you respect the engage, you take angles, you disengage, and then you retake the space afterwards, depending on the status of cooldowns. You don't die for an angle, but you disengage and then re-engage afterwards. And so the space taking here is great. It's just so unbelievably slow because the bad news is that we have bubble again. We missed our window of tempo. This is what tempo means. You missed your timing for the vulnerability of the character. You missed the Symmetra didn't have teleport. You guys missed your window. The Ana hadn't used nade. You missed your window. The Tracer didn't have recall. You could have pushed the angle. You missed your window. And so now, ironically, while I like the proactivity here, I would prefer the Kiriko probably to kind of spacing things a little bit better here, but this is still fine. I like the proactivity here in terms of angle control. The problem is that the tempo is off, and so that while Brigitte likes to close the gap, Winston with bubble is better. And so this is really, really freaking dangerous, as we can see. And so I don't mind the concept of what we do there. We just missed our window. We missed our window with both nade and bubble. Does that make sense? Let's look at one more fight. We'll look at an ultimate fight, and then we'll move from there. Okay. If you are, let's say, Team Blue in this situation, there's no primal, there's no nano, there's no nothing. How does Team Blue take space? How do they take lanes? I want you to simplify this as much as you possibly can. What's the simplest way of taking lanes or space right now? First off, is the number one thing we have to ask ourselves is who's forcing cart? Who's forcing cart? Cart. Who's got it? Who's got it? Tracer and cart. Okay. Who's contesting? Where? Okay. So then, what is my diva gonna do? Where did my diva go? Okay. So where did my diva go? First off, but like, what should my diva do? Where can my diva close the gap? Diva contests top. Why? Because that's close, right? It's not hard. It's close. That's it. So Diva contests top. Tracer contests point. We have effective range. Effective range. Okay. What about backline? What about Kiriko Ashe? Where do they go? Well, they just need a sightline, right? That's basically it. It's not complicated, right? Not complicated. All right. What about my Brigitte? What about my Brigitte? Is the gap going to be closed in backline from this height to here? I mean, it should be. Probably should be. Probably could be. So yeah, so my Brigitte will actually play with backline here. Not because they have nano or primal, because that's obvious, but because they have a superior position. So they're gonna be a gap closed. Now, in terms of angles here, I would probably say I don't like this usually, almost ever. I don't like a 3-man stack. I always like a little baby split, because I don't like big old cleave here. So what I would like in this particular situation is I wouldn't mind if we saw a bit of a split here with maybe Ashe with Brigitte here and Kiriko looking to angle on cart just a little bit from here within sightlines if she needs to get out. But the reason why that's the case is because we don't have a sightlane to pocket cart and any bubble is going to close off 3 members of the team. So right now, the problem is not that Brigitte and Ashe are controlling a sightline, it's that there's too many eggs in one basket, so one trade here shuts down everything, and that's the problem. Does that make sense? So do you notice that this angle here is fine, but not for 3 people? And so the problem here is that without an ultimate, my Winston is providing actual threat and actual zoning pressure without real punish. Now, tempo-wise, what should we do now? What's the problem here? What's the problem? 2 problems besides the angle control. Okay, what's the problem here? Need more aggression from backline afterwards. We've already seen that. Also, D.Va gave space. Why? If my D.Va sees this, what should D.Va do? The gap has already been closed. The tempo is already gone. Take top, kill the Sojourn. Take top, kill the Winston. Right. Now, if D.Va had already been here, I wouldn't have wanted to wait here, but if she'd already been here, then it would have made sense. But do not chase threats. You put yourself in the position, and if you're positioned well, the threats will be close by. Otherwise, they're not your problem. Otherwise, they're not your problem. You play D.Va to mark angles, not to chase angles away. D.Va's worst aspect as a dive tank is speed. Worst aspect. There literally any other dive tank can close the gap and deal with these threats faster than D.Va. By the time you get there, it's almost always too late. D.Va's best aspect is her staying power. In other words, she can get in people's face and hold space and just bother them for forever. D.Va can go up top here and just hold and hold and hold and hold and hold and hold. Very balanced character, right? But right now, it's too late. And so the gap, but there's been a cooldown waste. Now, if D.Va were to go up now, that would be fine. This is fine. This is gap closing. Now, let's look at this from an ultimate perspective, and then we'll wrap it up and go to a different code. Let's say my D.Va's here, Tracer's here. We're angled properly here. How do we use our ultimates here? What does Bob do? What is Bob's effective range? What is Bob's effective range? What is Kitsune's effective range? What is D.Va Bomb's effective range? You see I'm kind of playing with things a little bit here? Yeah, Bob's about like a mid, right? Applies a poke angle, but he can also be used to disrupt a dive, right? So you could bait yourself and then bob the dive. It's flexible like that, right? What about D.Va Bomb? Well, it's not about the bomb itself. It's what the bomb allows you to do, right? Allows you to close the gap generally a little bit more with pocket. Generally a little bit more. It's a little spooky with that new minor perk being the more attractive one right now. What about Kitsune? Very much a close one. Very much a close one. So how would you guys like to see Kitsune being used here? How would you guys like to see Kitsune being used here? What would be the trigger for Kitsune here? Does Kiriko want to close the gap right now? Can she effectively close the gap right now? Well, we know that the character doesn't really like closing gaps usually, and she can't effectively close the gap here. So not going to work. Now, maybe the Winston uses tempo and the Kiriko teleports top with D.Va and Kitsune's top. That would be risky, but it's possible. So how about we Kitsune rush when the Winston closes the gap for us? Now you might go, so well, what if the Winston doesn't close the gap? Well, then the Winston's not doing anything and my gun is, so he has to close the gap at some point. Now you might say, well, then what if he drops and then he just jumps out? Fine, you have the space. Now you take top. That's worth it. Okay? So when you're talking about how you're using your ultimates, you think about the effective range of the ultimate. That's it. And you decide, is the enemy team going to close the gap or am I going to close the gap in the enemy team? If I have beat, I close the gap. If they have beat, I think about denying them closing the gap. I bob their beat. If they have Sojold, we need to close the gap on that. So how do I do that? Well, I have bomb. I have Kitsune rush. So even ult economy is about playing your effective range. So if we look at what actually happens here, Tracer closes the gap, great job. D.Va closes the gap, great job. She has bomb, she can get away with that. We see aggression here. We're forcing card. I don't know why we gave up that space. I will be perfectly frank. This is not the effective range of the characters that we want to play. But it's not because low ground is automatically always bad. It's just that it happens to be a lot closer and a lot worse sightline-wise. So if you see this right now, if we don't Kitsune rush right now, if we don't bob right now, we're going to lose. Why? Because we are not in our effective ranges, and Brigitte and Winston are. Now you might ask here, well then they closed the gap. How come they didn't win? What's the problem for Team Red here, guys? They got their effective range, right? What's wrong? What's the problem? What's the problem here? It's not positioning necessarily. It's the T word. It's tempo. Look at the value! So much! But there's nobody there. Sojourn isn't peeking. Ana isn't peeking. Winston cycled out. Tracer wasn't staged. You know? So this is why I prioritize tempo first, because angling doesn't matter if you aren't doing something at the same time. You can have the Spilo seminar on flanking 24/7 as a Mercy player with pistols. Every single hero is flanking. Nobody even knows where they are. It's just amazing. It's a masterclass. I'm in tears, and still lose every single fight because the synchronization is completely borked. And that's it. And so what needed to be communicated here, and this is kind of the actionable feedback, is if you're Team Red, you're saying, hey, listen, if these guys gap close on us, this diva tries to take space, I'm rallying right away. Or if they drop or they try to force card or anything, I'm going to rally and close the gap on them right away. And I'm going to call that. And that's it. And all you have to do, you don't even have to like designate the complicated play. You just have to look for the opportunity and then just let your team know that's going to happen. Okay, we're gonna move on to another code here. I'm going to save Brawl for last because we're going to have a lot of fun with that. By the way, just for a fun little question. What's the difference between dive and brawl? See who's been paying attention here. I will call you out by name and yell at you. I will call your parents and tell them that I'm disappointed in you if you get it wrong. In fact, I will, if you get it wrong, I will dox you and then ring your doorbell and run. Tempo. Brawl is faster. Effective range. I said dive and poke, I think. Did I say brawl, guys? I might have said. Okay, so if I said brawl, we'll get to that later. What did I say? Dive and brawl. Oh, okay. Brawl and dive. Okay, good. Okay, so let's save that question for a second later. I made a mistake. I can't believe it. Never happens. What's the difference between dive and poke? Because that's kind of what we're looking at here. What's the difference between dive and poke? What's the difference between dive and poke? I apologize. Maybe I'm going to ring my own doorbell and run. Effective range. Yeah. Effective range. But don't we see sniper characters? Like we just saw on a Soj Ash, no? You get my point? Tempo? What do you mean tempo? Use my own terminology here. Because you're right. I think it is tempo. And by tempo, I mean, generally, if you look at Sigma versus Winston, you're just going to have a much more even output of damage. That's basically it. Now, there's one other important difference as well. So we talked about effective range. It's not just effective range. It's also the M word, mobility, right? It's mobility. As in, you are able to take short-range angles that are further wide, whereas other characters with less mobility have to take angles that are a little bit tighter. Does that make sense? So for you, is you're looking for characters that are able to open wide on wider maps. So the question is what's the difference between dive and poke? You're just simply playing characters that can close the gap on wider distances. That's it. It's mobility, and I think tempo is good too. Yeah, tempo, sure. But this is why you see hybrids nowadays, right? Because mobility matters, even with poke characters. Because running double hit scan on even a map like Shambali is just not that good. Because who's gonna freaking control this lane? You can't run a. What's another short range character without a mobility? You could run a Reaper here, but if your Reaper doesn't have CDs, he gets pushed, he dies, right? You could run a Reaper there, but it wouldn't be as optimal, right? You could run a Mei. That way you're valuing the short range potential of Mei more than the sustained mobility of Tracer. You could run Mei though. She's effective range for that. Yeah. So in these situations, really when we're combining Soj Tracer, we're not just doing it because we're running a dive poke hybrid. That's just describing the ingredients of the compositions. Sure. It doesn't really matter the difference between dive and poke. We could run a composition like this with Winston. The only reason we wouldn't is because it's too flat of a map for Winston to be good. But the composition of how we position our backline wouldn't change. It's the exact same situation. So I guess the point here is that it doesn't really matter what the difference between dive and poke is. The difference is just dive, we're going to put a character on a deeper angle. Poke is just going to have a little bit more even output. That's it. We're not playing for different things. We're still playing for angles and lanes and fight planning. It doesn't change. There's no win condition difference between the two. It's still lane control. It's still playing your effective range. It's still finding tempo. Because even a character like Sigma, as we said with Kaluj, needs to time his peaks. And if you don't, you freaking suck. That's it. So if you want to describe this as a dive poke hybrid or a poke dive hybrid, or if you want to describe this as actually a dive comp being played on a poke map because you've got every character has a bit of mobility here, that's fine. I don't care. Doesn't matter to me. You do you, man. Now let's look at Team Red's composition here. How does Team Red's composition want to play? Let's go down the list, right? How does Ana Wuyang position? What are these characters' effective ranges? Well, range, right? More range. So these guys are valuing the more open sight lines that Shambali sometimes provides over the ability to contest space in a close range. But poke. Now, in terms of which one takes the angle, well, the answer is both of them take the angle, right? There's no difference between Ana and Wuyang in terms of sight lines. The only difference is that Wuyang has more mobility, so Wuyang can open up wider. But is this the angle or is this the angle? The answer is it doesn't matter. As long as we're split, it doesn't. Both are angles, right? That's it. Now, Sojourn versus Echo. Well, Sojourn has the better effective range. Echo has a little bit of verticality and a little bit more mobility. So technically, if we were to classify the skirmish or brawl combo here, it would be Wuyang Echo. Characters that can close the gap, get their hands dirty a little bit more effectively than on a Sojourn. But again, it doesn't really matter what we want to classify them as. This is totally fine. Does that make sense? So if we look at Team Blue's composition, we already know who the skirmish DPS is. We've already clarified that Tracer can control the sightline. But what's the problem with our setup right now? We're getting it. It's happening again here. Who is the skirmish support? Who is the skirmish support for Team Blue? Wuyang? Kiriko? Ooh. What's the difference between Kiriko and Wuyang, guys? Who's more effective in closer ranges? Ah, you see? Nobody knows! It's tricky, isn't it? Now, a lot of you guys are probably going to say Wuyang, or Kiriko, sorry, because of the Suzu and the teleport. And you're right. Yeah. You ready for the answer to this? It doesn't matter. If they're close, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. Which one wants to play in the angle here? They can both function. That's fine. But somebody's got to freaking help this Tracer. Because she needs support. And not only freaking help this Tracer, you also look at the sightlines that this backline has. It's compressed, it's congested, and there's multiple ways to get surrounded from both sides. Just simple things like disruptor shots are already forcing Suzu. Whereas if we open our sightline here, all of a sudden, this feels so much more relaxing. There's no surprises here. So Team Blue needs to open their sightlines. Now, the reason why I'm highlighting support so much is not because support players are fraudulent. It's that a lot of this space control stuff comes a lot more naturally when you're playing a character like Tracer or Genji or Reaper. It's like, of course I'm going to go flank. That's what the character does. But it doesn't come as intuitively to these characters. Even characters like Brigitte, as we saw in the previous map. Supports really are the engine of professional Overwatch compositions. Everyone talks about DPS and Quartz, and you got these crazy crack tank players. But the engine of how angles are taken and space control is taken and how tempo is being played in terms of when you're timing your engages and even things like speed boost, right? It all is around supports. Supports are really the quiet main character of every composition in the history of Overwatch, going back from Goats to Double Shield and so on. If you don't have the support compositions to control different lanes, if you don't have the support compositions for speed boost, if you don't have support compositions to help your DPS and tanks, then the entire macro of Overwatch is different. They're the main character. And so right now, when your main characters are not controlling different split lanes, your Tracer's going to lose, not going to be able to get the same support that she's going to be able to get. We're not going to be able to get the support on the angles that we need to right now. And so we need a main character on an angle. And so when we talk about people like Awkward or whatever, talking about damage, what we're really looking for is angle. And the nuance of knowing when to, how far to split, how often to split, who to support, when does my Lucio go with my tank, when does my Lucio go with my tank. That's the entire engine of how this is being played. And so if you look at the problem here is that my Tracer's having to quite literally 2v1 without support. Now Wuyang makes the adjustment here. But the problem is that at that point in time is we've allowed that opportunity to be gone a little bit because Diva's been able to close the gap. Now that being said, King Von here, aptly named. Look at that. You see the range my Wuyang can provide? One shot is more value than my Wuyang has provided in the last 25 seconds. One shot. One shot. Just one shot. Just one shot. And this is why people run Lucio and Brigitte, is so that this kind of stuff feels so much more comfortable. We're going to keep moving here. I'm going to go to a different section of the map where we have a little bit more variety of angles to talk about here. And as you can kind of see here, this is where double flex, if you want to use that term, double poke, double ranged support feels interesting because there are more sightlines the more things open up here. But for Team Red, it's murder because what space is incredibly hard for Team Red to control right now. Do you see the problem here? Look at the problem for Team Red here. What's the problem with Team Red? You see it? You fool. Take space. However, is it easy to take an angle with auto wing on this corner right now? So I'm being critical here, but actually it's a lot more difficult than it looks. What is my Ana going to do? Go in here and flank? Well, maybe. Swing wide and get over... Oh, gosh. This is going to be hard, you know? Like, do you understand what I'm saying? So this is why this composition, even on a quote-unquote poke map as this, feels pretty rough. Because until you get that space, fighting for that space just feels terrible. Just feels awful. There's nowhere to go. And so our Diva's isolated, our Tracer's isolated, our Tracer's getting no help, their Tracer's getting help because this angle feels a lot more easy for the defense. And so Fragito tries in the second that Fragito tries. Tracer closes the gap. GG's. Blurs the goat. That's prime Kevster right now, by the way. And it's just rough. It's very difficult for them to close the gap. You notice that? In every angle that they walk to, there's a support and a DPS marking. Every single angle that they walk to. Now, would I like double flex on third point? You bet your bottom. I'd love it. Look how open that point is. But this is why teams at the high level don't run double flex here. They'll run freaking Ram. They'll run Lucio, right? They'll run not just because, oh, escort, you take a lot of fights, you know, that's fine. But just freaking Lucio's amazing here. Lucio's freaking amazing here. So again, when we talk about win cons, we just keep talking about the spaces that those characters want to control and how valuable it is to control those lanes with different characters. And that's why we continually see characters like Lucio Brigitte holding relevancy at the professional level. Let's keep watching here. Now, how should Team Blue hold this space here? Who's the fraud right now? Small adjustment. Where does our Kiriko need to be right now? Where does my Kiriko need to be right now? Right? Wide, right? Wide. Full pocket on Sigma. Open the angle here. You have the mobility and the angle to do it. This is exactly why you play double poke, so that you could just unleash agony onto the enemy team. Tracer on her effective range. Sigma holding the lane. Wing has to be cart. That's fine. But right now, we've lost space here. We've allowed this Diva to zone a lot of our backline and allowed that Tracer to stage because my Kiriko hasn't had a sightline here. So much of how we're playing effective ranges here starts and ends with supports. It's not because support players are bad. It's because it's so incredibly important for you to understand exactly what you're supposed to be doing here. So when we're talking about playing poke, all you're effectively doing is you're opening up sightlines with supports and with DPS, multiple angles playing their effective range, and then synchronizing your peaks and your pressure with your tank line. Now, when you're asking, like, does that mean I literally can't peek without my tank? No, but if your tank peaks, you better darn well peek. Now, let's look at one ultimate fight, just as kind of an impetus to discuss how we're going to do this. Get a bit of a stagger here. Let's get, like, one fight here. Okay, Team Red. How does Team Red win this fight? How do they win? Simplify it for me. Let's focus on the priorities. So a lot of people are like, how do I fight plan? How do I fight plan? I don't know who shot calls it. Okay, you ready for this? They're ready for this. Usually when you're fight planning at this level, the only thing that you should focus on is the low hanging fruit. We don't need to talk about Diva Bomb. We don't need to talk about Wing Ultimate. All we need to worry about is Kitsune Rush and Nano Boost. That's it. Now, Wuyang ult, if you want to enable, that's fine. But the obvious ones are the easy ones. Nano Boost, really consistent and good. Kitsune Rush, really consistent and good. So all I need to do is close the gap. So if I'm coaching Team Red here, I'm saying, guys, they have support ults. So we need to be really careful of this closing the gap because Kitsune Rush is really good as a closing the gap ultimate. So we need to keep our distance, but we need to close the distance with our Nano Boost. You understand? So if I'm red here, who do we nano boost? Sure. Now, why would you not nano your Sojourn? We talked about nano boost being good when gaps are closed. Why would I not nano boost my Sojourn? Sojourn doesn't want to be close, exactly. Is there a dive character that is going to close the gap? Or a Brawl character that is going to close the gap on my Sojourn? No. No, there's not. Now, that's not the only thing that nano provides, but yeah, the damage reduction is the big one, right? So no, I'm not going to close the gap because there's nothing to catch, so to speak. There's nothing that's going to close the gap on me. Remember when we talked about Brigitte staying with Sojourn because we knew that the Sojourn was going to get the gap closed on? You guys remember that? Right now, there's no gap to be closed with the exception of Kitsune Rush. So all we need to do is we need to turn our brains off, hold the angle here, and nano our diva. Now let me ask you guys a question. We'll keep another question. How should we split our angles? Does Diva go by herself? Obviously, I'm begging the answer to the question. It's obviously the answer is no. So then let me ask you, who needs to be laning with Diva? Because this is a pretty open sight lane here. Who lanes? Tracer? Sure. Who else? Wuyong? Ana? Now, I like the Wuyong answer because I like the mobility of the Wuyong. But I like the Ana answer because she can get the timing of the nano correctly because if she goes with the Diva. So maybe she has to nano from main. I don't really care. The TLDRs, I don't really care. There's arguments for both. There's arguments for either one. It's a more convenient nano and a wider angle for nade, or a more convenient rotation and a safer angle for Ana to play. So 3, 2, 1, nano Diva. Either support takes the lane with these two. And then the Sojourn and the other support just burn the Sigma shield and don't die to Kitsune Rush. You understand? So here's how that would be communicated. Guys who have Kitsune Rush, care about getting too close. Let's nano Diva. Somebody go with Diva. So we talk about our ult, their ult, and what angle we control. The 3-step program. Ult track, our fight plan, basic setup. And in terms of the factors, literally the only thing you have to call is the lane, the one lane. Now, does that mean that there's only one lane always? Like, you don't send your Tracer on a different lane? No, sometimes, but we don't need to worry about that. Let Tracer decide it. Call your lane. Ult, track, fight, plan, lane. Ult, track, fight, plan, lane. Ult, track, fight, plan, lane. The biggest problem that a lot of teams of all ranks, even higher level teams, screw up with fight planning is that they don't do the basics. Like I'm telling you guys, I've worked with so many high level teams, and the teams that are really good at fight planning really don't do anything exceptional. The one exception to that rule are people that are really good at like mid-fight calls, like carrying ults mid-fight, but that's a much more difficult thing to do, and it's much less important than just simply doing your homework. It's like the secret to success, the secret to success is it's all these secrets, the life hacks. No, you just simply do the basics, and you don't ever forget to do the basics. So in this particular situation, I know we haven't talked a lot about communication here. All we have to do is track Kitsune Rush or Wuyang ult or whatever. Just don't get close to these jackasses, right? Make it hard at least. Figure out one of your ultimates, the easier one, and then call an angle, and that's it. That's really it. That's really it. And you notice here that we didn't even talk about Sojourn ult. You know why? Too hard. It's too hard. It's too difficult. Too hard. Or Diva Bomb? Yeah, too hard. Wing ult? No, too many variables. You don't need to. Now, if you get better at the mistakes, or get better at the basics, and you want to layer that up a little bit, be my guest. But don't worry about making a 7-layer cake when you can't even make a pancake. You understand? Because this is a lot of value. Just simply calling a Nano Diva and supporting that Nano Diva on the angle while avoiding Kitsune Rush, that is so unbelievably good right there. That's so good. Don't worry about it. So the question here is that going to happen? Now, obviously, I'm being critical, and the answer is no. But the problem here is that we've been unable to get a support on an angle here, or even try. We've never taken a risk. And so now we've got a solo Sigma with a pocketed Tracer. Diva's trying to close the gap, but there are no support ults here. And so not only were we unable to catch them closing the gap, but we've been unable to do anything on the lane. Now, some of you guys are going to go, if my Wing had gone here, could he have not just died on the angle? You ready for the answer? Yes. Doesn't matter. Doesn't matter. If you're not willing to take space in some way, shape, or form, you're not going to win the fight anyway. You're not going to win the fight anyway. I mean, we just saw it, right? You're just as risky. Because if you let yourself get shoved into a corner, the wing bubble's going to kill you even easier because the Tracer's going to have the free lane. It's over. Nothing ever matters, exactly. Nothing ever matters. You might as well try. You might as well try. Okay, let's take a look at Brawl. And I'm actually going to utilize Christopher's seminar, because I like looking at Brawl, not just from like, because it wasn't a Lucio mirror. So I'm going to use his, so this won't be a replay code. We'll have to kind of skip around on the YouTube code here. Let me get my stream picking it up here. Window capture. And we'll select this. And the reason why I'm doing that, as I said, is because I want to see it from a professional level perspective. And we're going to look at a little bit. It's going to be non-mirror mostly, but we'll talk about the mirror as a concept here. Let me share my window here. Okay. Okay. So Christopher talks a lot about like the different types of compositions. We're not going to talk about that as much. We're just going to go from my perspective, which is that with the exception of speed disengages, that basically every composition plays for space control. But the important difference is the different type of spaces being controlled. So let me ask you guys a question. Let me actually pull up my display capture here so that I can see chat at the same time without alt tabbing. So give me just a second, because I want to actually read what y'all are saying. Can't believe it. I actually care what you guys think. It's a common feeling, having empathy and emotions. Let's try this here. You feel so seen? Yes. Okay. Can you guys tell me, using the terminology that we talked about today, Team Blue here, all right? What type of space? What's their effective range? What type of space are they controlling? Just do it by ingredients. Like let's really make this simple, okay? What do Kiriko Wuyang, what kind of lanes do they like to control? Open space, right? Sightlines, pokey. What about Freya? I mean, obviously, right? Ball, he's going to close the gap on you, and Tracer as well, but they can go so far wide and so far isolated. This is the real difference between Brawl and Dive. If you want the technical terms, the difference between the Brawl character and a Dive character is not their effective range. It's how much sustain the Brawl character has, so their ability to hold space passively, whereas Dive can go off in their own very deep. So wide maps good for Dive, compressed maps good for Brawl, and yet Dive characters want to close the gap too. They just want to close the gap deep. That makes sense? So in this situation here, we're going to see Ball Tracer going way off in a lane together. Kiriko probably should open up an angle herself. Wing open up an angle. Freya open up an angle. Now, if you said the word slowly, Team Blue got to win slow, you should be ashamed of yourself, because that is absolutely not the case. This is not about tempo and from a terms of how fast or slow. Tempo is, remember, just a question of timing. Because if you think about it this way, if we get a Ball Slam, Tracer Engage, Kiriko Headshot, Wing Orb, and a Freya Bolt, do you think Team Blue can win this fight fast? Of course. I mean, it's a stupid question, right? Of course they can win the fight. I mean, they'll burn through Suzu. It doesn't even matter. You will explode. So if they position themselves in their effective ranges and they press their buttons at the same time, they're going to explode. And what you're going to notice is that's going to apply to every composition in the world. If you position yourself correctly, you're going to explode. You're going to explode the enemy team. And I remember this was a thing back, man, it must have been 2019. I remember talking with another coach in NA, and he was talking about like tempo and about like, we got to play slow, we got to play fast. And all of a sudden I had this epiphany. I was like, no, we don't. I was like, we could beat the crap. I think it was Volskaya. I was like, we were running like ball sig. I was like, we could just go fast. The second they go, full commit. If we have the cooldowns for it or the damage or the angles for it, we don't need to play slow. Like, what the frick are we talking about, guys? We have guns. Like, they're crossing in the open space. And you got to remember that in these situations. So the difference between these comps is not fast or slow. These guys play slow. This guy plays fast. Oh, they have speed boost. No. The reason why they're running Lucio here is the ability to move the point, to deny objective, right? But what's the difference between Lucio and Kiriko? Or let's say Wuyang. What's the difference between Lucio and Wuyang? Yeah, speed boost, sure. But what's the difference between the two? Close and far, right? So let me ask you a question. What kind of space do you think Lucio wants to control or is better at controlling than Wuyang? Close space. So if you're Team Orange here, your Team Peps, are we going to win the duel in this little... Can you guys see my mouse? In this little cage here? Can we win that duel if we have our Lucio in there versus Wing? Yes, we can. We can win that duel. What about on point? Yeah, probably. I mean, if we can deny, probably. I don't know how we can sustain there if they have multiple long-range sightlines, but yeah, point is, if they take the fight to point, we will win that fight, right? So when we're playing this composition with, Hazard versus Ball or Lucio versus Wing, this is not a stylistic choice in terms of how the compositions function, only in terms of space. Only in terms of space. So if you actually look here, I'm going to skip around here a little bit. If you look at how this is positioned here, you can even see it with Peps. Peps prioritizes cage while also providing space control in here. So the thing about this left side of our map here, if Peps can close the gap or force fights to a location that is more for their effective range, they're going to win. If Blue can open up wider sightlines, more damage, better vision, then they're going to be able to do more damage. So it really comes down to not a stylistic choice, but a positional space control choice and who can actually do damage once they get their positions. And I think Chris talks about it here. But the way to look at like coaching is if you get people in the positions that are correct for their effective ranges and you lose the fight, it really just comes down to mechanics. It really comes down to mechanics. So if like, let's say Liquid here gets every angle that they want, they're all playing their effective ranges and they lose, it just comes down to, did they just mechanics? That's basically all there is to it. Now, we're going to keep going here. And again, I'm just using this because it's really hard to find. I mean, I don't have OPRXs and it's really hard to find. So, okay, let's ask another question here. What's the effective range of Team Red's composition versus Team Blue's composition? What are the differences? Pretty simple, right? Same thing. Freya versus Cass. It's a question of range. Wing versus Lucio. Well, it's an effective of range, right? So who should win the initial space control on this height here? Well, Red, right? They're going to be able to close the gap. Like you can't push them out right away. You have to wide open and poke them down, right? So you are unable to do anything unless you open up sightline. You're running Lucio here not just to move your tank around to push, pull, and all that stuff. You're just simply doing it because Lucio here is the most valuable support at controlling the space. It's just more range here. Now, as the map evolves and we're able to open up more angles, which generally takes a bit of time, I definitely favor Liquid's composition here. But you can even see it. Look at how these players are opening. Look at the range signature. Red wants to close the gap. They're unable to close the gap. And right now, this is the problem with how a lot of teams that play these compositions, not necessarily the professionals, but how a lot of teams at this level struggle is what's the problem with Red's positioning right now? I'm going to say Red. I mean, you know what I mean. Orange, red, Peps, whatever. What's the problem with the Red's positioning here? Right. So they've taken this space, but they've stopped closing the gap. They've stopped closing the gap. Cassie cannot beat Kiriko. He has to close the gap here. Freya, 1, 2, 3 lanes here, and yet Dip, Willie, Zora, FD Godzera, not only do they not have consistent cover here, they've been unable to stop closing the gap. They've stopped lane control. So what should Red have done here? How would you close the gap here? You tell me. How would you close the gap? Kept walking, right, kept walking. Who should keep walking here? Who should keep walking here? It's tricky, right? Do you have Willie's anchor point? Does Willie's walk forward? Does Zara with FD God close the gap with speed boost? See, that's why Lucy's so good. It's not just space control, but he can space control. He can close the gap quickly, right? Cass, sure. Maybe Zarya, Cass, Lucio. Kiriko holds the lane here, right? With Tracer. There's options here. There's options. There's creativity. This is why players like Quartz do so well. It's not just due to mechanics, but this guy always finds the lane, finds the angle mid-fight, and closes the gap, or opens the sight line. But a failure to close the gap means that Team Blue, the slow composition, quote-unquote, wins the fight fast. Why? Because they had the optimal position, and they had it quickly. Do you see that? Look at how fast they won that fight. Took them 3 seconds once they had the angles that they needed. 3 seconds, and people died. That's how it works. Now, I'm going to talk a little bit about something here really quick here. So one of the things with when do you +1 your tracer on the lane? When do you put the? I talk about that in great deal to a lot of my other Lucio reviews. We're not going to get into that recently. We're not going to get into that too much. If you want more feedback on like how to play Lucio in these compositions, like I said, I just did a champion session recently. You can check that out. It's a subtle self plug there. But yeah, the more important thing here is when you're plugging and playing, whether your Lucio is on the angle or not. The only question that you need to ask is if you're looking to pull an engagement with your tank. And if the answer is yes, then you need to close the gap on the angle with your tank. Because if you think about the situation here, Is this lane up on top of our screen close for Lucio? Yes, that's great. Lucio's very effective here. Is the lane here in the bottom effective for Lucio? Yes, it's also very effective. This is also very congested here. So you can do either one. The question comes down to whether you need to speed disengage, because the reason why you run Lucio here isn't just because of the close range setup. It's because Lucio can cheat an engagement by disengaging a slow character. Tracer does not need speed. She loves the healing and she loves the damage in pocket and boop. She loves it. It's great. Lucio Tracer, I'll disagree with Chris here. I think Lucio Tracer are phenomenal together. They're phenomenal, but only when you don't need the speed for a slow kid, right? And in this particular situation, do you think Willy's needs the speed? Are we trying to pull an engagement right now? Are we trying to pull or disengage an ultimate? The answer is no. No, obviously not. There's no ultimate right now, so the only thing that matters is the neutral. So in this particular situation right now, Lucio should be with Tracer. Here's a question. When should Lucio be with Sojourn or Freya? What is Lucio's effective range? So when will Lucio's effective range be effective with a hit scan? So how does that work? When will Lucio be in close range with a hit scan? Think about it. Right. If the gap is going to be closed on your hit scan, either through a Symmetra teleport, through a sound barrier, or through a dive tank, then you are going to be in your effective range when you're playing with hit scan. Do you understand? So when you're playing Lucio with hit scan, you are not thinking about, oh, I'm going to close the gap with my hit scan, because it doesn't usually make a lot of sense. Sometimes it does, usually doesn't. It's more about, is the enemy team, do they have the resources, the heroes that are going to close the gap on my hit scan, in which case I'm going to be effective. If you're parking your Lucio with your Sojourn on a wide open map versus a composition that will not close the gap, you are, and I'm going to say this kindly, an idiot. You need to be closing the gap with either your tank line or with your flanker, because you need to play your effective range. The only time you play your Lucio with your hit scan is when they are going to have the gap closed on them. Okay? So in this particular situation, FD God is well positioned. Zoro is well positioned. Open sightline, close sightline, close sightline, open sightline. Peps looks great right now. Peps looks great. So who wins this fight, fast or slow? Well, we already know the answer to that. It doesn't matter. Right now, I think if you look at Liquid, they're probably pretty pleased with their positions as well. We've got a closed angle for Ram. That's good. Open sightline for Kiriko, open sightline for Freya, open sightline for Wuyang, and a closed sightline for Tracer. So this right here, if we freeze frame this right now, this is just mechanics. Who wins this fight is mechanics. Infected will maybe get booped down, in which case Dip can deepen, which can force RuPaul to lose his angle. Zoro has the high ground. Tree has the sightline. Who's going to hit their shots? Is Vega going to force bubbles out of Willy's? Is Zero going to get a better angle to force the Zerion's cooldowns? This is just mechanics. So Lucio is super strong often because he could do so much, not only to enable closing the gaps, but to deny the enemy closing gaps through his CCO's amping. Right, exactly. This is why Lucio is so important for symmetric compositions. It's not just about amping out and disengaging. It's because the enemy team, whether it's with beat engages, teleports, whatever else, diva boosters, they are so good at closing the gap on your hit scan and support. And so you constantly have something that you need to do. And so right now, if we play this out, this is just going to come down to mechanics, because I'm extremely pleased with how both teams have this set up. And I know this is where Chris, I think, talks about how Lucio Tracer doesn't work, but I'm going to kind of give my 2 cents here. And I think that this is exactly why Lucio works here, because there's no other support, even Brigitte would be awkward here, that can close the gap and actively duel with their Tracer and provide value. You're not just playing Lucio for the speed. You're playing it because he's the best close range support in the game. In fact, that's actually the difference between Lucio and Brigitte. It's not just speed, but despite Lucio having a gun, he's better in close range, because Brigitte can actually have impact in multiple different long ranges with her armor packs. Lucio can't. So where he is, he's OP. That's basically it. He's not OP fast, ironically. It usually takes a little bit of time for him to get value. But this is great. There's not a single other support that could actively help their Tracer clear this lane. Because if you think about it, if Dip doesn't have help here, he's going to be stymied by this Ramatra for the most part, or he's going to have to kind of go with his tank, right? Dip being here is very important. Dip being here with FD God is exactly what Peps needs to be able to control this lane. So this is fine. It's not going to happen fast. It's not burst value, but that just comes down to mechanics. So we're going to keep moving on here, and we're going to go on to, I think, do we get a third point here? No, we go to King's Row. Oh, this one's great. Okay, this one's great, because this is a non-mirror, so we get to keep going here. All right. What is the difference between Team Blue and Team Red? Again, I'm just going to say red. You guys know what I mean. What's the difference? Let's just plug and play. DPS. What's the difference between Casme and Ash Venture? Kind of tricky, right? Kind of tricky, right? A little bit more range for my hit scan, so a little bit more open sightline. But then what about May Venture, right? I don't know. Like the Venture can go on deeper angles without getting punished, but May's got a lot more self-sustain. Basically, these are very similar DPS lines. You've got the more ranged Pokety guy, but he's a little bit worse than Ash. And you got the more brawly Pokety guy, but he's a little bit, or she's a little bit more Pokety than Venture. So you got DPS that are going to be on shorter sightlines and longer sightlines, but they're pretty flexible on both of them, right? So it's weird. Yeah, it's weird. But see, this is the thing. This is why you don't have to memorize rollouts. You just say, I'm going to play Cassidy on an angle that feels good for Cassidy. And that's it. There's your macro. Congratulations. You solved the game. It's not complicated. It's not complicated. All right, let's keep going. What about the tank line? It's real simple, right? Real simple. Now you could say tempo tank. I might call you an Overwatch developer if that was the case. But what's the difference between Sigma and Ram? Really simple, right? Really simple. Just distance, range. Sigma can absolutely brawl with Ram, just not unless he's got a little bit of pokey poke early, right? So this is where like the terms like slow versus fast come down, where Sigma wants to spend time in his effective range before Ram can close the gap. But if Sigma plays fast versus Ram at range, he's also fine. He just can't get the gap closed. So gap close range, longer range. So how do you think Jasmine's going to position? All right, let's look at the back line here. This one's really simple. Get it? Okay. Bat versus Bap, obviously it's the same. It's Lucio versus Wuyang. So in terms of space control, who's going to be better, do you guys think, at controlling this little hotel? Who do you think is going to be better at controlling this open sightline of the map here? It's really easy, right? Really easy. Lucio versus Wuyang? I mean, come on, right? Lucio's going to be so much better. So not just do we have the opportunity to close the gap with our Lucio, but if we just simply off angle and duel on off angles, if the Lucio is able to control that left side. See, this is why Lucio is good. If you go, okay, well, sure, fine. Whatever you say, Spilo, you put Lucio in that room with Cassidy, and they win the hotel. Can whip, yip, skippity doo. What do you do with that? You know, we got to close the gap. No. If Lucio is the ticket to getting your Cassidy in this hotel room and not allowing other people to, what do you think Quartz can do with this angle here? If your Lucio is the reason that you win off angles, congested off angles for your DPS, what do you think Quartz can do with that? You see, this is why people run characters like Brig Lucio. And this is why DPS should love Brig Lucio, is because they are your ticket to winning lanes, to congested lanes. Wuyang can't help you in here. Wuyang can poke you out before you get there and just rotate away. But Wuyang can't. Wuyang is better at helping his Ashe hold the height here than a Lucio is. But Wuyang can't help. Wuyang can't stop Quartz from taking this lane here. Right, it's lane theory. So if we look at Team Blue here, we're going to look, is Team Blue going to fight for this space down here, which Lucio, May, whatever, going to take for free? Or are they going to fight for this lane here? And because they're running Lucio and Cass May and not Ashe Venture, they get their pick of the litter. So let's see. What is TM going to do? It's a Lucio comp. What's win con for Blue? Closing the gap, right? Closing the gap and running it down mid. You're right that it's closing the gap. But it's not about running it down mid. And not even a team like TM will do that. So you see how bad this feels for TM right now? Because has TM closed the gap at all? No. Nothing. It feels terrible. Shield's forced, Icebox forced. Feels terrible. Shift is forced from the BAP. Feels terrible. So TM is going, frick, man, how do we close the gap? 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 It sucks. That's just the worst. I hate Overwatch. It's just weird. May takes the angle. May closes the gap. Solo flank, by the way. Solo flank. Astro speeds. Right room. Closes the gap. Now, let me ask you guys a question. What support could do this right here? I don't know if you guys can see Astro getting up there being a hamster. Not a single support could have done that. Closed that gap that quickly and held this space. Not a single support can do that. Ram on main. BAP on angle. Cass on open sightline. Lucio May in closed sightline. Or closer sightline, we'll say that. And by the way, how would you describe, now that we have this setup here with Lucio May, Cass BAP, Ram on main, if we were to say not tempo, but speed, urgency, what's the urgency that's being utilized here by Twisted Minds? Is there urgency? Do you guys smell urgency here? Is there any urgency here? I mean, obviously, right? No, there's no urgency. No urgency at all. The urgency was getting to these positions. And then now that they're here, we're smoking a cigar and chilling. Why? Because we have, are you ready for my final term for the day, Shirley? Passive advantage. when you have the positions like Team Liquid did on that first Ilios Ruins fight, whether it's fast or slow, it doesn't matter. You have the advantage. You do not need to do anything when you have superior position. Let me ask you guys a question. What is Skewed's angle looking like right now? What's Zest's angle looking like right now? What does Vigilante's angle look like? Just terrible, right? Proud's got an angle. Jasmine's got a bit of an angle. Doesn't feel good though, right? They've been shoved into the locker. They do not have the angles that are effective for their effective characters. They have terrible. So if you turned off your monitors and held primary fire, you win this game. Oh, by the way, let's see if you guys remember. Why is TVNT good on point? Why is Ramattra good on point? What's Ramatra's effective range? What do you have to do to stop them capping? Get into his effective range. You got it? So if we play this fight slow, the only thing that can matter here for, I don't even know, is this T1? I don't remember. The only thing that can go is a mechanical clutch from T1. The only thing. But the opportunities for that are rapidly closing. And you look at Jasmine. Jasmine's suffering. Point is capping. Quartz is angling in the left side. Quartz goes back to main. Quartz will angle on the left side. And eventually, they're just going to whittle them down. I mean, it's only a matter of time, right? It was only a matter of time. Whether it was fast or whether it was slow, the results are the same. Now, we won't talk as much about the compositional swaps there. The Zarya is more so that you can kind of catch and engage from the Ramattra and continually apply pressure. Chris talks a little bit about this because I'm using Chris's VOD as an example because I think he talks about a couple points that really elaborate on mine, which one of the things that Chris says here that's actually really important is this theory of that, like, it's often better times to give up objective space and fight on a location that's better for your composition than it is to take multiple fights. And I think that's actually a really important point here, where he's basically saying that this section of the map, you do not have good angles for your Ashe, BAP, Wing, whatever. It's too congested. So you should just give them objective control and fight on an area that actually makes sense for your composition. And I actually think that's a really, really, really good point, and it's something worth considering. Especially when you don't have speed boost to come back from spawn faster. So yeah, we're going to skip ahead here, and we're going to go to the back half here. And I want you guys to look, we're going to wait for an overhead here. And we're going to wait for an overhead. Come on, give me an overhead. Okay, what do you guys think of T1's lane control right here? I don't know if you guys can see it here. Let's get it. Do we get an overhead? Come on, Chris, give me the overhead. We don't get an overhead. Okay. We've got, who do we have here on the angle here? We have Zest here, Venture. We have wide angle with Wing, Kiriko, and Ashe. Venture on the lane. What do you guys think? Yeah, a little bit of lane control, right? But we've got up top and we've got main. Now, let me ask you guys a question. Do TM take a thing about angles here? The team with Lucio versus a team without Lucio versus a Zarya. Do they think about angles here? Of course, right? Of course. Look, they're aware. They're aware if they speed boost and try to close the gap here, they're going to get murdered from multiple different lanes. So what do? They gap close on a lane. On an angle. You see it? Split push. Now, why do they do that? Because as we already said, if they don't do that, they'd get pincered. So then the real question here is, why doesn't T1 stop them from taking this lane? Why don't they stop? Why don't they stop them? Anybody know the answer here? Why don't they stop them? We've seen this already twice before, right? Why don't they stop them from taking this lane if it's so important? You ready for the answer? Because Quartz is scary, sure. It's Lucio. It's Mei. They can't. This is too congested space. You cannot stop a Lucio comp from taking this. They're going to take it away from you. They're going to take it away from you. There's no way you can stop them. What are you going to do? Throw a lamp? It's over. So anything that's short range just is an auto ticket to winning that angle for free. And this is why compositional selections matter so much, because you just simply cannot contest TM in this. Now, the real question isn't if this angle was just automatically won by TM, how come they didn't win? Because if you can't fight for this angle here because, oh, it's too short range, what can T1 fight for? Where can T1 go? You play the other angle. You wrap around behind. And that's exactly what happens here. Now, for those of you guys that are noticing here, You may notice that T1's backline's kind of stacked here, and it's mostly the solo DPS taking the lane here. I'm going to be honest with you guys. This is a mistake. This is a massive mistake. This is where Skew needs to have the confidence in his team to be able to use his shift to rotate out wide and open his lane with his venture. This is a mistake from T1, absolutely. And as you can see, it's really easy for TVNT to kind of avoid that. But eventually they do open their lane accordingly. And the reason why you do that is so that you don't get your gap closed and run down on. Good disengage there from the Lucius speed boost. And again, you see the gap closing. They're trying to close the gap on the right side here. They're trying to mark. And so they then it's like, okay, well, they're opening the lane on the right side, so we need to mark the lane. And we won't go too much more into that. But yeah, even when you're playing these double poke comps or these brawl comps, it's all about closing gap, closing gap. Now, Chris talks a great deal about the triple split. We're not going to talk about that as much today, but I do want to highlight that the most blase brawl objective forcing. Remember, okay, here's a question. Why is TVNT on cart? Why is TVNT in cart? Short range, right? Somebody's got to stop him. Somebody's got to stop him, right? Okay, so then what lanes can this composition comfortably control? Let's just pretend, look at Yubi's corpse, okay? That's a great sentence. What lanes can TM control with their composition? What areas of the map are they good at? Right, point, absolutely objective. What else? What other space here has more cover, has more sightlines that are more effective for their... Hide the bridge, right? You wonder why Yubi was there? Right? Something to consider. Something to consider here. So really the only question with this is, should Astro have been with Yubi? I mean, we don't really know the context here. I'm not going to really worry about the context too much here. I think this is more, no. This is just a punish on the TP. But if you actually watch this from the eyes of how are Twisted Minds controlling space while they're forcing the objective, I want you guys, if you guys have not seen this seminar, you absolutely need to. Chris does a phenomenal job. But look at it from a perspective of how Twisted Minds controls space even with these TP comps. And you'll notice a very interesting thing where TVNT is often isolated on his own lane on cart, and you'll see courts move around the map and open up different sightlines that are effective for him. And you'll watch T1 struggle. You'll watch T1. So it's very much an objective game, but the reason why objective game matters, and I say this as somebody that was also part of the Ryan masterclassing with London back in the day, it matters because Reinhardt is the one that forces you to play in his effective range by forcing cart. We'll watch it again here. Zarya on cart. Look at the angle control here, right? We've got 1, 2, 3 up top. Look at it. Look at the space they're controlling. Now Lucio's there. Now they're going to go in this small room on the left. Why? Do you think this composition can contest this composition, these heroes in this space here? Look at the open angle. Now they're forfeiting this top here, so that's an important distinction here. As soon as they vacate a lane, that lane gets filled. So you got to be really careful. Now you'll see this from Yubi a lot. I don't know where Yubi is. Oh, Yubi's on main. What you'll see from Yubi a lot is Yubi is often even willing to sacrifice himself just to die for a lane, to die to contest it. And then as these fights evolve, look at the space control here. Courts, 1, 2, 3, 4 lanes. Does this look like Brawl comp to you? Does this look like Brawl comp to you? At least your understanding of Brawl comp? Same stuff happens in mirrors. If you guys watch the grand finals, which I definitely recommend that you do, watch the mid-fight angles that Quartz was taking with both Lucio speed and without Lucio speed with symmetric teleports. Absolutely insane. Absolutely insane how much better TM was at space control and Alcad on that day. How much better. Look at the split again here. Look at the split. Look at the split, right? Kiriko on the lane, Quartza opening wide, saving for teleport just to disengage as necessary. The TVNT forcing objective. If you're a ball here, who's your priority target? You see? Even look at the lanes that they're controlling, right? It's a space that forces Proud to get into his effective range. And what happens to Proud? What happens to Proud, right? Over and over and over. The reason why you're playing Symmetra is not just push pull. It allows you to cheat setup angles in ways like right now, we could just teleport and skip steps and immediately change our lanes. So every single setup from TM, while they're forcing the objective with Zarya, is with the intention of controlling short range off angles. Always short range off angles, short range off angles. And the struggle is constantly for T1 to try to open up long range wide sight lanes. And if they're unable to do it, they're going to be unable to stop cart over and over and over and over again. Like they're not even using speed boost here. occasionally, but they're not even really using speed boost here. They're using Lucio to deny the lanes that these guys want to use to dive. And when they're using speed boost, it's just the gap close. But you notice that the gap closing isn't always with the tank running it on mid. It might be gap closing on a flank, on the right or on the left. And we'll wrap up here. I think that's basically it there. But basically, when we're talking about win conditions, if I could wrap this up in a nutshell here, the concept of gap closing, the concept of poking, the concept of tempo and diving and so on, really all these things is just different interpretations of what type of space that you're controlling. What type of space? When you're playing a Brawl hero, what type of space do you want to control? And how can you provide value? When you're playing Poke, what type of space are you control? When you're playing Dive, what type of space that you control? Really, all you're doing is you're describing characters that can play on different angles, deeper angles, shorter angles, longer angles. And the real difference between the compositions is more of a consequence of the individual ingredients and everybody playing to their strengths. When you're playing Sojourn in a dive comp, quote unquote, you don't play to dive all in and go kill the backline. You just play like a poke character. And you provide value by trading with the enemy tank's HP. When you're playing Ram with a dive comp, I mean, you saw it from Infected there, right? On that Alios Ruins. Do you think that's called a Brawl comp? Or is that called a dive comp? Is that called it doesn't matter. All Infected doing is doing Ramatra things, which is holding a short range off angle and living. What a well-designed character. That's what Ram that's what Ram does. So you're not bending your character's strengths or weaknesses to fit the composition. You're just simply using your strengths and weaknesses when and where you can. And that's basically the entirety of it. So you don't change, you don't warp, there are not win cons to Brawl, Dive, or Poke. There's just different space to control. And the exception to that rule is the Lucio, Symmetra, Teleport, Disengage, Speed Boost, which is mostly used to simply disengage. But the reason why Lucio is so valued as not just a gap closer, but as a layering of fights, is because his ability to gap close and his ability to control short range space is unmatched in Overwatch. Unmatched. There's not a single character that can do that and consistently do that. I mean, think about like that Brigitte on Gibraltar, right? Obviously, you're not going to run Lucio there, right? But how awkward it was to have the gap closed on you, even for a character like Brig. So when you want to understand the win conditions of the composition that you're playing, whether it's Poke, Dive, Brawl, or Hybrid, is to toss those monikers out completely outside of an individual character basis and to simply put your characters on ranges where they're effective and then to match the tempo, match the timing of your character. That's essentially it. Okay, that is my rant. We can talk a lot more in detail as you guys would like, but I'm available for questions. I know we went a little bit over on the seminar. There was just a lot to cover, so I'm down to do as many questions as you like. I don't think there needs to be a timer, so we could do whatever you guys like.
All right. Well, thanks a lot. That was excellent.
Sure.
Let me go in order. I'll have some people come up.
Hello.
Yo.
Hi. First of all, thank you for taking the time to be here.
Of course.
Really appreciate it. Secondly, I really appreciate you glazing the blue team on Gibraltar. It's one of the teams. That's the team I coach. Really appreciate it.
Of course. Good job.
I can't take all the credit. My assistant coach is goated.
Sure.
But I have kind of a personal question and like a related question.
Yeah, of course.
A personal question would be, what was your favorite meta to coach or to participate in?
So I have a special a place in my heart for the Ball Sig stuff towards the end of Overwatch 1. It was Balls in, I believe, Tracer, Echo, Briggs in stuff you guys might remember. And the reason why that one was really important for me is because not only was it a lot of fun to coach, this was with Sheer Cold back in the EU Contenders days, but because that was the composition where I really felt like I really nailed down my understanding, or began my understanding of Overwatch, because I had this epiphany one day when I realized that coaching our Zenyatta player Lucer, I realized that fishing for 5 orbs on Brig and Zen across the map was just infinitely less useful than hitting a single body shot on the enemy Tracer. And I realized that, oh my gosh, if our Zen just pockets our Tracer and we shoot their Tracer just a little bit and our Tracer wins the lane, now all of a sudden we can dive and kill backline. And that moment, like everything clicked. I realized that like it wasn't about stats. It wasn't about fishing for one shots, or it was to win the lane first. You got to the access to the back line. And that was like a relief. So I loved watching it. I loved playing it. I loved coaching it. And it was a really important one for me.
Okay, that's me personally, I'd have to say Goats was probably my favorite meta, but
Sure.
I'm a fanboy.
Yeah.
Second question is translating the higher level thinking
Yes.
of Overwatch to lower level players.
Yes.
Like I said, like it was mentioned, the team I coach is around around the low diamond ish. How would you go about like making it in layman's terms and something that lower level players can understand
Sure.
without overwhelming them with too many other factors?
Sure. So obviously we talked in detail about like numerous different things, and that just allows you guys to kind of pull whatever you'd like from it. But like as I said, the most important thing to pull from the seminar today, and the thing that's actionable both in ranked, is don't overthink the composition style. Just simply play the angle or range that is effective for your character. Take an angle that matches your character's effective range. And then this is like when I'm working with like literal platinum Lucio players. They get all up in their head about, should I be peeling my backline? Should I be speeding my tank? Should I be helping my tracer? There's like 7 different things. I'm just like, okay, look at the map. Look at the situation now. What angle feels comfortable for your character? Like which one would you like to duel with? And they're like, well, I really like, they're just, okay, go there. But yeah, but like, should I be peeling my backline or help? No, just go there. Just go there. And that's it, right? Now, that might mean that you're helping your tank. That might mean that you're helping your DPS or peeling your back. I don't know. But go to the spot and then let the value happen on its own. And I think like that's a really, really strong foundation for, not just support and tank and DPS players, but anybody, because so many people get all caught up with the macro and the micro and the priorities and whatever. And the reality is that if you just simply put yourself in the positions of the map that makes sense for your character, you're going to play a lot better.
Okay. Thank you. I really appreciate it.
Yep, no worries.
Invited someone up, waiting a few more seconds to see if they join.
No worries. Somebody's panicking. Hello.
Hello? Okay, now you can hear me.
Yes, lovely.
First of all, thank you for this amazing seminar.
Of course.
So my first question was, how important do you think comps are?
Compositions?
Yeah, just like,
Okay.
is it okay if like you just run whatever you want, or should there be, for example, just a brawl comp, for example?
Yeah. The way that I look at compositions, all the way up to the highest level, essentially, is that the effective strength of the character is definitely important, but it's like way overblown, at least until you get to the highest level. What matters is that there's a cohesive intent behind what you're doing. Let me give you an example. It doesn't matter whether you're playing Tracer or Genji as a short range character for most compositions, right? What matters is that you're purposefully trying to get better at the Tracer Genji composition. So for example, if we were looking at that Jib and my Tracer player is swapping random characters and just screwing around, that's really bad. But if you're actively saying, I'm going to make Genji work, we're going to practice Genji for a bunch of scrims, we're going to see if it works, that's really, really important. So I don't think it matters what you're playing necessarily for compositions, but you also don't want to be screwing around and just doing random stuff. It's like the equivalent of like the people say, I'm limit testing and they're just enting. That's not what we want. You need to have like before the scrim starts, you need to go on, this is what we're playing. These are the swaps that are available to us. This is the purpose of what we're trying to accomplish this. Because I've worked with teams before, in like the team coaching sessions, and a lot of what they do is just kind of in the moment swaps, and that's a really, really bad precedent to set. Not because you'll swap to a bad character, but because you're not really getting a lot out of the scrim. You're just trying to win the scrim block. But if we go in there with the intent of finding out that like, hey, is Juno just overtuned? Like, can we make Juno work? Like that's a good question. We should go try that out. Like, do we like Juno comps? Okay, like, is Winston dead? Is Ramatra back? Is the Junker Queen nerf relevant? Is Sigma still OP? Like, these are are things that you guys have to answer with intent. And it doesn't really matter what you play, but it does matter that you actually give the effort behind the practice.
Okay. And for my second question, I was just wondering, like, what is the most important when it comes to comms? So,
Right.
like, is it more important to do like a fight plan, or do like, I don't know, like cooldown calls? Like,
Sure,
what
sure.
is the most important?
Fight plan, 100%, not even close. More important than ult track. Technically
Yeah.
more important than calling your off angle. I would probably say in terms of priority, it's like calling your fight plan, as in just like a single ultimate or just your neutral engagement plan. Calling your angle, like calling like what your split or lane's going to be like. And then third most important would be like anticipating what they're going to do. So alt track is the obvious answer, but like, as I said, it doesn't need to be a thorough alt track, just a general concept of like, they have Bob, Care Bob, or Kitsune Rush, or just whatever. And then the fourth most important will be like cooldown tracking, right? And then the fifth most important, and this is going to blow up a lot of people's minds, is target priority. Target priority just does not matter very much. Mid fight, late fight, 100%, but it's by far the least important thing.
Okay. I heard a lot of target priority is one of the most important things. So
Yeah, it's not. The Vol fight's 100%, but start of mid fight, no.
And for my last question, so a lot of teams when they're new, obviously are like bad at calming or like just are scared.
Yeah.
Do you have any tips for that?
So a lot of fear when it comes to communication is more of like the social ramifications of looking like an idiot, and people don't like looking stupid. People would rather do nothing and lose the fight than do something and lose the fight and look dumb, right? Yeah. So you need to understand that bias, it's not even necessarily social anxiety. Like, it's just normal for even confident people. Like, nobody wants to look dumb. So what I would do is, first off, is like, you kind of have to address the elephant in the room and be like, hey, I know we feel a little uncomfortable. We're scared of being wrong.
Yeah.
But we really need people to kind of step up and speak up and not be afraid of being wrong. Set the example yourself by communicating your ultimates and actually making those plans and looking like a jackass sometimes, but being okay with it. And then crucially, when people follow your example and try to communicate a little bit, do not punish them for being wrong socially.
Yeah,
right.
Definitely.
To be like, don't worry about it. Like that was great that you called that. Don't even be like, but next time why don't we do? No, just be like, yeah, that was great. Let's try that again. Just let them, because the reality is that if they're under any sort of pressure to call and they're already scared about it, they're probably not going to make a very good fight plan.
Yeah, probably.
It's because they're not really thinking very clearly. So it's going to be a bad fight plan. Just go ahead and embrace that, but allow them to make a bad fight plan and then make another bad fight plan and then make another bad fight plan. And then all of a sudden they're going to feel a little bit less stressed about it, and they're probably going to think a little bit more clearly. But nobody puts their best foot forward. So set a good example. Don't punish them, and you just got to really encourage the people to speak up. So.
Yeah. Okay. Great. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. What's up?
Hello.
Hi.
Hey, thank you for coming. I would just like to get it out of the way that it was a really big pleasure to work on the promotional video for the seminar.
You killed it.
I'm glad. I honestly think I could have done a much better job if I had more time.
Yeah.
However,
I looked really
life has
ugly.
been a
You could
little
have used a little bit more Photoshop. Less of my face, I think.
Apologies. I mean, personally, I think you look good. Anyways,
Thank you.
I'm gonna ask the questions that I want to ask.
Sure.
The first question is regarding what you were talking about with effective range, with heroes.
Yes.
And I really paid a lot of attention at King's Row first point when you're talking about Ramatra going on point, because he is in that effective range.
Yes.
And I'm aware that, and it's common knowledge for all people, that heroes have various effective ranges, but it crossed in my mind that isn't it that every hero can be relatively effective at close range with a few exceptions? Off the top of my head, I have Wu Yang because water need to go boom.
Yeah, exactly.
But like other heroes that are not like Wu Yang, for example, let's say Genji, sure, his range is, for example, not that good from a poke angle, so Or for example, let me think. For example, Widowmaker. Yeah, obviously you don't want Widowmaker on
Right.
the point, but if he is on crack, he can land
Right,
some really
true.
good shots
True,
and also move around effectively.
Mm-hmm.
And I was wondering if maybe we can look back at that clip and maybe review how different heroes in that current situation would work there if it ever came to some compromise where the tank just could not be on the point, and how we can
Yeah, sure.
maybe work around that.
Yeah. Like, give me just a second, and we'll pull it up real fast. So that's a great example, and by the way, that's a really good thinking exercise for understanding macro, is to pretend that you were running a completely different composition in that situation or a completely different hero, and asking where would that hero position themselves, right? So if I were running, what we'll do is we'll go through that situation and we will just randomly pick characters and be like, what would they do? What would this character do? What would that character do? Can you guys see my stream again here?
We can, yes.
Okay, let me make sure I've got the window capture here. It's the wrong window. Why is this picking this up? Give me just a second here. Okay, yeah, we're good. So if we go to King's Row here, first point is what you're asking for. Does it really matter?
Yeah.
Yeah.
First point is where that thought came into my mind, but any example you see fit
Sure.
is fine by me.
So let's just pull. So Yubi's got the Mei poke, and Mei's very, very flexible. Mei's great at controlling multiple different types of angles because of her effective range is very malleable. So let's just, Yubi sucks. We're going to replace it with the GOAT of Overwatch, Necros. And Necros is on Genji here.
Real.
And Necros is going to control what lane here? So you're like, well, Necros could hold hotel, but there's already somebody there. So where can Necros play on right lane? And I'm not necessarily asking you particularly. I just want Chad as well to think about it. So what Necros would do is Necros would close the gap. Necros would keep deepening on right angle until he meets his effective range, which would probably be somewhere where my mouse is if Sigma was there, or if Sigma's not there, literally wrapping all the way around. Chris talks about this on Ilios with the Freya with, was it Sugar Free or Tree? I think it was Tree. Basically just wrapping all the way around until he meets his effective range. So if your Ram is getting blasted on point, too much range, they're not coming to point fast enough, then we can just set our DPS on the best angles, best lanes possible. Genji just keeps going. Okay, let's say Widowmaker. Where would your Widowmaker play in this situation? What lane?
Probably where Necros would be starting off, like
kind of where
that
Mei
little
is.
balcony where the mini is.
Yeah. This general area. Just hold the lane here, play it nice and slow, or play it nice and fast. They're gonna win. Yep. What about Sombra? Well, maybe something similar, kind of that medium range. Maybe playing up top here could rotate all the way around the back line.
Similar to Genji, but I would personally play Sombra on a lower level. I don't know. I'm not
Sure.
a Sombra player.
That's totally fine. Ashe, probably same thing here. Hanzo, same thing here. Somebody in chat, give me another hero. Any hero. Support, DPS, tank. We'll plug and play it. Well, actually, not a tank.
Lifeweaver.
Lifeweaver. Okay, so where would Lifeweaver open my lane here? So we would have, let's say, Bap Caster here. So where would Lifeweaver hold space?
Around the Mandata Tower?
Yeah, it'd be double poke, right? So you'd have an open lane here and probably more of an open lane here, right? You wouldn't want to stack here, but you also couldn't close the gap in the same way that you could with Lucio. Be a little bit trickier. Vendetta. Well, Vendetta would probably function very much like Genji. Take top, close gap, see what happens. Pharah. So Pharah's an interesting one. Pharah can do the exact same thing with her rework, but if she wants that vertical cover, what you would want to do is you'd actually communicate and you'd have the lane flipped. So you'd actually send Quartz all the way up through stairs with speed, and Quartz would control this lane instead, or play the spoke angle, and Pharah would play here instead. Junkrat would do the same thing. Deepen all the way, or have Quartz go into the long angle, Junkrat goes in the short angle. Symmetra, same thing. Symmetra is very flexible as well, which is why she's so strong. Symmetra can close the gap playing in Hotel, but Symmetra can also just TP up top and just control this space versus the Sigma, or then deepen flank literally all the way around behind. Yep. Does that make sense?
Yes, it does.
It's just the lane theory. Yeah. Go for it.
I have another question, if it's not a problem. Okay,
yeah,
so
go for it.
Another question of mine is that you've mentioned Lucio a lot as being quite a very important hero in the Overwatch landscape, and that we've had if I remember correctly, don't quote me on this, that we've had very few heroes like him, purely because of his speed boost.
Correct.
And you've also mentioned that Juno is not a tempo hero because speedring is just a part of her kit, not the core of it.
Okay, so let me clarify. I said Juno without speedring, I would say, but she is absolutely like that burst of speedring is absolutely. I mean, it's why you saw the broken Juno Diva meta. So I'd say what I was kind of saying there is in terms of when she doesn't have speedring, her value is much more patient and controlled. But she's absolutely, I would say, a cooldown focused character with speedring. So I want to clarify that. So go ahead, just keep going.
I see. I was wondering if you could maybe describe what heroes, at least in the support category, could come close to that Lucio pedestal, because I was thinking throughout the whole seminar and I cannot come up with a coherent idea on
Well,
who
there really
can
isn't, right?
match his energy.
There really isn't, right? Yeah. So in terms of short range space, we brought up Brigitte as an alternative on certain maps and certain compositions. She's the only really other support that can control that short range space. We saw situations back when Lifeweaver had his minor perk and was 275 HP. Teams like Geek were able to control more aggressive angles, more close range sightlines with that iteration of Lifeweaver. Obviously, that's not really possible anymore. In terms of both, if we look at both tempo as an expression of burst value, then there are characters like Ana, there's characters like Kiriko that also have significant burst value off of their cooldowns, enough to provide power spikes that are unbelievably important. But in terms of controlling short-range space while also having the burst value of something like Amp, it just isn't good. The other thing about Lucio as well is if you look at like high-level Overwatch as a fight planning of like trading ults for ults, one of the really valuable things about layering with ult fight plans at a high level is consistency of output. And what that means is that ultimates that are consistently able to provide value without a ton of setup. That's why things like Valkyrie, right, just doesn't age as well. Something like even like Rally can be challenging. It's a great ultimate, but it's just not quite as good as Beat a lot of the times. It has nothing to do with whether the ultimate and a rank level is as good. It's just not as consistent. There's a lot more risk. There's a lot less consistency wooing ultimate. Is wooing ult better or worse than Beat? Well, consistently Beat's going to beat it. It's why things like Primal Rage, it's why things like Annihilation from Ramatra and Brawl Menace is just consistent output of value, and Sound Barrier is just always good. So in these really congested 1-for-1, 2-for-2, 3-for-3, 4-for-4, 5-for-5 ult trades, having an ultimate that has that much range, that much consistency, and then he's tied that with the minor perk that provides amp along with that, it's just too good. So Lucio just has way too many tempo things where his amp is unbelievably powerful. His beat is unbelievably powerful, so you have this burst of windows. And then in terms of his ability to control short range space, it just is not matched within the support cast, essentially.
I see. All right. Well, thank you for that.
Of course.
I also have another question, if it's
Please.
all right.
Of course.
My question is regarding something that you've said in a YouTube video I watched today, and it was regarding mechanics and how people mistake aiming types, like tracking and flicking. It's probably familiar to you. See, as a Genji one trick for the most part of his lifetime, I've had that very bad habit that you've demonstrated of just jittering and jerking your mouse around like you're spasming. And my question is how to break that habit. Obviously, it is first of all to calm the heck down and focus on your aiming a little bit more. But if I remember correctly, don't quote me on this, you have mentioned that you've also struggled with it for a long time.
Yes.
And I have played other shooters except Overwatch. I played Titanfall 2, and that's a very mechanic-heavy game, and over there I'm flicking nonstop. So I was just wondering, what helped you overcome that very difficult barrier? Because yes, mechanics are not important that much. Okay, sorry. Mechanics are not the core part of Overwatch, but a good shot can change the fight.
Sure. So I'll actually clarify. I think mechanics are everything in Overwatch. I think everything in Overwatch is positioning and mechanics. I think mechanics are a little bit undervalued, just a little bit, because it feels right to say that a game as strategically complicated as Overwatch, but mechanics, even in terms of how you move, how you move your crosshair, how you use your abilities, it's everything. It's a very mechanically demanding game. So don't undersell the importance of mechanics. And the reason why I say that is because my solution to your problem is going to be training your mechanics. You need to train your mechanics. I had a conversation about this several weeks ago. I've got a video in the works on how to train your mechanics. And the way to fix it is you need to go into a certain percentage of your ranked games and you need to train being smooth and slow. That means to be the entire focus of a large percentage, 40%, 50% of your ranked games is just to smooth your aim out. That's it. So what I mean is that...
saying that... Go on.
No, go ahead.
What you're saying is basically that if I want to just fix my mechanics, I should not focus on game sense things that much for
Correct.
the most part, but
Correct.
just shutting down every part of your brain except positioning mechanics. That's it. You don't want to
Not
think
even
about
positioning.
anything else.
Bail positioning. Throw it out. 50% of your
Okay.
games you should be focusing on angles most of the time. 50% of your games you should be focusing on mechanics. Mm-hmm. So when you're in a mechanic game, you are literally only worrying about being slow and smooth. And what that means sometimes for people is it means you have to kind of consciously control it. For other people, it might just mean prompting yourself to smooth. Just think smooth. That's it.
To just consciously think about it.
Yes, that's correct. That's the only thing that matters.
Follow-up question. I think I am misunderstanding the concepts of angles and positioning because
Sure.
you told me to throw out positioning entirely and to focus on angles. But
Sure.
I
Well,
feel
okay.
like I am
So
not
let me clarify real
understanding what
quick. Yeah. So when I say throw out positioning, what I mean is when you are working on your mechanics, you are not working on your angles or positioning. You understand what I'm saying? Now, if you'd like to think
Yes.
about those things pre-fight a little bit, then obviously I'm not saying that it's not physically possible to completely forget everything else, right? But that's the goal, is to be single-minded and vice versa. Does that make sense?
Yes, it does. I just wanted to ask you for a little bit more clarification because
Sure.
I don't think I understand the difference between angles and positionings. Because if you want to take an angle, you need to take the position of the corresponding angle.
Sure, of course.
No? Or am I
So
missing something?
the reason why I clarified the difference between angles and positioning is the same reason why I was trying to myth bust anyway. Like win cons and effective ranges. When people say they need to work on their positioning, I always ask them, what do you mean? And usually people kind of, well, I'm too passive, or well, I'm bad with cover, or I get too close, or I don't take enough angles. And then I say, okay, so now you know what you need to work on. So when you say you need to work on your positioning, that is not good feedback. That's like saying your mechanics suck, work on your mechanics. Well, what do you mean? When you said you suck mechanically, you said I'm too jittery and I'm too shaky and I'm too flicky. That's correct. Go practice that. Don't practice your mechanics. Go practice that. Don't practice your positioning. Practice your cover usage. You see what I'm saying? So
Okay,
you need to break
so
down
you're
your
giving-
positioning.
I see. Okay, but maybe you already gave the answer to this question, or I'm just absolutely stupid.
No, it's okay.
When in like a theoretical concept, what is the difference between taking an angle and taking a position? In most fights.
There's no difference. There's no difference. An angle, the difference between an angle and just a position is that you are split from a portion of your team. You might be with your tank or with the DPS, but you're not stocked as 5. That's it. So when I'm asking you to take an angle, I'm just asking you to take a position that makes sense for your character. That's it. So when you're asking yourself, you need to work on your positioning, the only thing I'm asking you to do is to be what angle should you be on. So when you're working on your positioning, you need to be more clear with what you're working on. If you have a tendency to not take off angles, you need to work on your off angles. If you have a tendency to get too close, then you need to work on maintaining your range. If you have a tendency to break cover usage, then you need to work on your cover usage. The reason why I don't like saying positioning is because it's a blanket term that doesn't deal with the individual player's problem. So if you are very bad at taking off angles and you tend to clump with your team, then you need to not work on your positioning, you need to work on your off angles. It's not that positioning isn't accurate, it is a weakness of yours, but it's not specific enough to help guide your practice. You need to guide your practice specifically. Does that make sense? Like if I watch, let's say you didn't know that you had a flicking habit. Okay, let's just say that. Let's say that you didn't know what was wrong with your Genji aim. My Genji aim is bad. You paid me $1,000 to get a VOD review. I VOD review you, and I say your mechanics suck. You need to practice your mechanics. Do you see how that's not very helpful?
Yeah.
What do I do with that, right? What if you paid me $1,000 and I VOD review and I said your positioning sucks, you need to work on your positioning.
It's a very vague explanation.
Right. So for you, it's like when you ask, I need to work on my positioning, I challenge you to look at your reviews or your games and be like, well, what about my positioning needs to get better? Am I getting too close? Am I not aware of my team setup? Am I too split? Am I like, what's wrong with your positioning? What's the pattern? What needs to be trained? Does that make sense?
Yes, it does. Okay, I'm gonna just keep one last question for now. I might ask one later because
That's
I don't
fine.
want to take the spotlight from
I appreciate
myself.
that. Of course. Great questions.
When it comes to the flex DPS category,
Mhm.
it has come to my knowledge that that is a very more or less broad concept. Like, because we have different heroes, obviously, that do different purposes compared to hit scan DPS, which all more or less share a lot of common ground, which is take this place, shoot mouse one, click head, GG. However, flex DPS are very different. We have flyers, we have assassins, we have I honestly cannot come up with anything else right now. But my question is, how would you categorize flex DPS heroes, and where would you ideally play them?
Sure.
I hope the question is not too long.
No. It's very simple. It's very simple because we've actually talked about it all day. Our entire seminar was talking about effective range.
Oh, fuck.
No, it's great. It's a great question because it may give you guys some closure. Same way you play flex DPS. Flex DPS players are usually the short range DPS. Usually, that's it. It has nothing to do with hit scan. Has nothing to do with projectile. It's just short range. That's it. Effective range. That's why you have hit scan players playing Freya Hanzo, because you want the longer range guy playing the longer range DPS. Now the question is, well, then why do what plays what when you are playing, like, let's say you're going to play, I don't know, Genji Tracer. Well, let me ask you a question. When you're playing Genji Tracer, does your hit scan or flex DPS player, which of them have more experience with Genji or Tracer? You go, well, we want to play Genji Tracer, but my hit scan has no experience playing Genji, but my flex has some experience. Okay, so maybe he can play. So what you do is you just look at your hero pools of the people that you're playing with, and you'd be like, well, I'm going to put my hit scan guy on Tracer. Is it because Tracer's hit scan? No, just because he has experience playing Tracer. That's it. It's the reason why we talk about flex and hit scan is because back in the day, you would put hit scan, long range character on hit scan, and then your other guy would flex around to Mei or Genji or something along those lines. So it's the same way that main support versus flex support is really just describing the ranges of the characters. Usually, that's all that we're describing with DPS as well.
I see. Okay. Just one quick follow-up question. Usually, as a flex DPS hero, you need to have Genji and Tracer, obviously, and at least one flyer, and to my knowledge, Mei. And my question is to you: when it comes to a flex DPS hero, what do you think would be an ideal hero pool in not necessarily current meta, but in the current overall Overwatch state of things?
Sure. I mean, it's just patch notes, really, or what your team wants you to play. I don't think it really matters particularly. I mean, you look at a lot of the flex DPS players right now, everyone's got their pocket character, right? Do you have a Wicked Reaper? Do you have a Venture? I don't know. It's up to you. Sombra? Totally up to you. In the current meta right now, I think Symmetra is probably the most relevant flex DPS. She's the shorter, brawlier DPS that controls those angles like a Lucia Brigitte, while her hit scan controls the longer. But that's subject to change at any point in time. And you got to remember that like it following the meta is the only thing that should decide things when you don't really know what to do. When you have no personal preference, follow the meta. When you do have personal preference, trust your gut.
All right, thank you.
Of course, mate.
Once again, I'm glad I could work on the program.
Yeah, you did a great job. It was beautiful. It's really well done.
I'm glad. Thank you again.
Cheers. Hello.
All right, hello. I'm Jess. I'm public relations for the Elemental Org. Just don't ask anybody else. I promise it's true. I have a couple questions. First of all,
sure.
Wonderful to meet you. I was a fan of London for a long time. Even
nice to meet you as well.
The not so nice season.
Yeah.
You know, hey, I stuck it out.
Yeah,
and I told them,
you
knew how to hit those on land, okay? I knew.
Yeah, me too. I mean, joining halfway through the season, I was like, Hottie was. Hottie kept his chin up, man. I'll tell you what, he definitely kept his chin up. So shout out to
I
Hottie.
love Hottie. Also, I have a very colorful vocabulary that I'm going to try and keep less colorful.
That's all right.
Because they told me not to. So I might be a little slow and use
That's
too many
fine.
words to ask my questions. All right. First thing I want to ask, because I coach teams, right? And I've been trying to put people on the Brig Kiri, and they're hating it. Is it bad? I think it's solid with Dive in the current moment, just because Brig can help Diva so much with brawling.
Sure.
How is it?
So Brigitte, Kiriko, again, you just have to compare the differences between the obvious alternative, which is Kiriko, Lucio. And the difference is that Lucio is just going to be a little bit more powerful in those shorter range spaces. It's going to allow a little bit more movement with your core. So in situations when you are having your Lucio stacked with tank to pull or push with an ultimate rather than controlling an angle, you're still controlling an angle, just not with a Lucio. The Lucio is going to be just a lot better. So what I would look at with the Brigitte versus Kiriko is you ask yourself two questions. One, does the map reward wider angles? Does the map reward more open sightlines? Now that might seem counterintuitive, but remember we're comparing Brigitte to Lucio, right? In that situation, Brigitte is definitely going to perform better. The second question that you have to ask yourself is the current ult layering of the meta, in other words, the ultimates that are available, does it reward us having a speed boost? Will we want to disengage Kitsune Rush? Will we want to disengage the Annihilation from Ramattra? Will we want to disengage the Sojourn ult? Will we want to disengage the Symmetra wall? So if there are many ultimates in the teams that you're playing with or against that are easy to engage or disengage with, gap closer ultimates, we like to call them, then the Lucio speed boost feels really good. If you look at your ultimates and you see Bob, and you see Diva Bomb, and you see Pulse Bomb, you may go, do we really need the speed boost anymore? Do we really want the speed boost, or could we just kind of control short range space more passively? So Brigitte is just the difference is if the map means that you're not moving around, it's more of a static control of angles, and there's not as many ultimates with which you want to push and pull and move around with, then the Brigitte is going to be able to provide more. But a lot of it just comes on to player comfort as well.
Alrighty, my next question. I'm somebody who also started as a bronze player back when
Sure.
I was 13 years old.
Sure.
I was convinced I could play Tracer. I couldn't, but I climbed the ranks. I got to plat. I joined a team. I don't even remember what the team was named. I think it was Ruby or something.
Sure.
But I was a player for a very, very long time. Have far more time in scrims than I'd like to admit. I was double blocking EU, NA, and sometimes scrimming Australian.
That's crazy.
Dude, I was addicted to the
crazy.
game. A lot of coaches would give this thing that, frankly, because I didn't know any better, right? Because it was when I was first starting, I was like, oh, this has to be like that. But now as I've grown, became a coach myself, a better teammate as well, and a better player, I found myself disagreeing with it a lot. A lot of coaches, and more amateur coaches, let's just say like diamond level, plat even, sometimes even masters, are like set on this tank fight plans, main support ult tracks, DPS are going to echo the target calls. And I hate it so much because there's been times where I'm in it and hey, I've been known to bust out the IGL Junkrat and it's kind of nasty, Whenever I was younger on my more successful teams, the ones that stayed together and weren't just like a 2-week thing of like, hey, we're going to all play together and then oh no, everything exploded.
Right.
There was a lot of times where I was just carrying comms,
Right.
I played off tank a lot of the time, but I would still do the fight plan. I would still do the ult tracking. And in Overwatch 2 even, I did it, playing main tank mostly. I still did ult tracking, fight planning, that kind of stuff.
So the question was, is that system, is it concrete? Is there flexibility? What do I think about that?
More so, what do you think of it? Like the main support ult track, tank plan, that kind of stuff.
I mean, it's fine. The reason why those stereotypes kind of came to the head is because generally the brain space of the people involved in those decisions, it just comes more naturally. Like main tank is the one that has to generally close the gap. So if we're talking about gap closers, as we've already established with the Lucio Brigitte question, gap closers is just something that becomes a lot more important with ultimates, right? Like most ultimates are gap closers, right? Or are very effective in close range. So having your tank thinking about ultimates because they're playing the character that is plays in close range just makes sense because they're going to be the one that's confronted with that ultimate, right? Main support, got a character that is generally has less pre-fight positional stuff. Now, obviously, as we already established, still a lot of pre-fight positional stuff, but maybe a little bit less so. So there's more time for ult track, and then DPS are kind of echoing. So basically, the answer is it doesn't matter. You're absolutely right. It really depends on the person and not the role. The person and not the role. The only thing that I would highlight is that with anything that involves mid-fight communication, I really, really don't like highly mechanical roles to have to worry about mid-fight communication. Because they just need to be focusing on like playing their character correctly. I would say that like they should call their angle, they should call their position. But I mean, you know the answer to this one. I'm going to echo your opinion. If it's the person, it's not the position. Basically, when it comes to those kind of roles.
Yeah, because like there's some excellent tank players I met that just they're kind of quiet and reserved, but like they know what they're doing. It's just like they aren't really as bold with we're gonna walk here and you guys are gonna come. You know,
right.
Not everybody's built like that.
That's exactly right.
My next question. So obviously 2021 and 2022 London, vastly different, right? Not so much with the roster, just more so with the outcome.
Oh, it's definitely the roster. It's definitely the roster.
Okay, a little bit of the roster.
I could give you my take on that. So when I had joined, I had joined right as after midseason has already concluded, and we were 0-8 at that point in time. And we can blame ping and stuff like that. I mean, ping definitely mattered a lot for sure. Starting 0-8 is definitely a thing as well. But I definitely think like we upgraded our roster. I think we upgraded our coaching staff for sure at that point. Like when I joined at the 0-8, I did a lot of the heavy lifting with a lot of like the macro micro one-on-one stuff and a lot of the mental stuff as well. So I'm tooting my own horn here, but basically that team was not in a good position, either mechanically, mentality, understanding wise. I mean, we just didn't have really much of an advantage. I think Hottie and Sparker, Molfig were definitely like highlights in the team, but we weren't great mechanically for sure, and mentally either. So we just did not have much of an advantage. Now I will say, after I joined, nobody will remember, but we almost beat the Dallas Fuel, and we were one team fight away from beating the San Francisco Shock as well.
I remember.
Trust me, I will never forget. I will never forget. The worst game of our entire season was the toilet ball. Ironically, we beat the Titans, but it was the worst game we played the entire year. Fun fact: we actually had blacklisted the Titans in scrims. They were so bad. So that was a bit of a humiliating moment for us. But yeah, like we were definitely better with Chris's leadership for sure, but also with the mechanical caliber of player. But that is my interjection. Continue.
I mean, with the people who did stay from the 2021 to 2022 season, you obviously like going from Overwatch 1 to Overwatch 2 may have been a factor, because I believe that's the change, right? I hope I'm not dumb. I think that was
that was the change. You're correct. Yeah, okay. That was the alpha.
Do you think that like that was a massive like change, or do you think it was more so the players that they were surrounded with like being upgrades, as well as just maybe different mentality?
Yeah, great question. I mean, we had a lot more time to kind of develop our own style and our own macro way of understanding things, with like finding the balance between Chris's objective focus and me rapping about angles all the time, and Commander X doing a lot of map solving breakdowns. So we had a lot more time to like let the coaches cook, which was exactly what we needed. I think obviously I think positionally we pretty much received upgrades at basically every position as well, which definitely helps. But I actually think in terms of like the theory of the game, I actually think we were in a worse spot than we were in Overwatch 1. The off-tank like play style, like being able to control lanes, control angles, helping us to force more objective focus pressure, more congested fights, which is just the nature of 6v6, definitely favored our hero pools a lot more. And I actually think if it had remained 6v6, we probably would have done just as well, if not even better. Playing into Nano, Winston, Dragon Blade, freaking beat. I mean, there was an Ana Lucio, Winston, Genji Meadows, Doomfist. It was pretty freaking rough at the time. Like Landon's permanently dead. Sparkers, we're on Soldier. Like, so I think the meta and the macro of the game was actually hostile towards our hero pools, and we just compensated for it, but with the caliber of coaching and the caliber of players that we had, I think.
Okay. As I said, like I coach teams, and most of the time, like every time before, like some of the current teams I'm with, I've always been like the head coach. Sure. I take the reins, but recently I've taken more of an assistant coach spot.
Sure.
In some teams, and there are times where I hard disagree with the head coach. How should I go about that? Do I mention like in front of the players? Well, I think you guys could also do this, or should I just save that for like, hey yo?
All right. So
private.
we're going to get more sauce to this one. So I think that this was the thing that I did the worst at with my second season with London. So the first season with London, I was able to have a decent amount of impact because I had a pretty good relationship with Fisher, and he kind of like let me run roughshod when and where I needed to. I had a really hard time with the second season with London with kind of knowing my place with Chris between respectfully disagreeing and not being a yes man. And I think a large portion of the problem was the fact that I was remote. I think that was a decision that I had to make personally with, being married and so on. I'd done the whole remote thing before, or non-remote thing, and it sucked. But it definitely compromised my relationship with Chris, not like in a toxic way. Like this isn't like a big drama thing. I wasn't very close with Chris. And that's my responsibility. And so that meant that a lot of my ability to kind of disagree and communicate, to provide feedback respectfully, and for him to disagree with me just was compromised because the relationship wasn't strong. So the reason why I give you that in full lead up is because the best coaching staff that I was ever a part of was with Sheercold. And I had recruited EasyBot, Jew, I think his name is now, and Thor. And I actively went for coaches that disagreed with me constantly. But it worked because I had very strong relationships with those coaches, so that we would get into like intense arguments over macro and rotations and so on. But there was never any feeling of like a lack of trust. And so for your situation, your number one priority is to build your relationship with the head coach. Build a relationship, strengthen that relationship with the head coach so that you can be critical respectfully, of course. Because I think that if you are unable to disagree or be critical with the head coach's decision, you are failing as an assistant coach. And if you're unable to do that because you don't have that strength of relationship to be able to kind of have those discussions comfortably, then that is your responsibility. And that's definitely my biggest regret from the second season with London. And I would encourage others to just be very, very much aware of that. It's a people skill thing, if that makes sense.
Alrighty, yeah. Me and him have a decent relationship. Hey, even whenever I didn't know him, I would tell him if I disagreed.
Sure.
With him,
It also depends on the coach too. It depends on the coach. Like
he's really receptive to it.
So then that's great. That's a really good strong starting point then.
My final question.
Sure.
So I have a strong desire to possibly go pro with coaching. Maybe not like OWCS, but maybe like tier 3, tier 2, maybe even collegiate. How should I get my name out there? Is it like by taking as many opportunities as I can get? Just build a good rapport, or should I like go the content route, or do I just like let stuff happen and see where it goes?
It just play into your strengths. So I kind of went the content direction early, but the content really didn't help me that much. I kind of joined late. I didn't have any connections. The best thing I can tell you to do is to treat it like a player. Like you need to. So many coaches that I've worked with just kind of treat the game as like they don't treat the game like a player. Like they don't VOD review themselves. They don't set goals for themselves. They don't actively push themselves. They just show up, they provide feedback, they win or lose based as a result. Like if you're not as serious about your coaching quality as you are about like improving your rank in game, then you're screwing up. Like you need to treat yourself as if your entire purpose is to improve the level of coaching quality. And then obviously like there's a lot of his social skills. Like you said, how do I build connections? Do I focus on? So if some advice I'd give for you is like making sure that like whatever team that you're working with is actively pushing you and challenging you. That doesn't necessarily mean that you go with a highest ranked team, although that's definitely a factor, but like you're going with a team that like provides challenging people skill opportunities, provides a lot of opportunity to grow, and you enjoy working with them. That's number one priority. But the other one is just like, you got to be so freaking hard on your grind. You got to listen to your coaching sessions. You got to ask for feedback from players. You got to ask feedback from other coaches. You got to study the game. You got to take notes. You got to look at your system with how you're coaching and how you're practicing and how you're providing feedback, and ask yourself, could you be doing it better? In what ways could you be doing it better? Is there something wrong with the way that you're communicating? Are you being respectful? Are you checking in with players consistently? Like these are things that, it took years to develop the skill set for. But a lot of coaches are very much like, they just kind of, they're like looking for the connections or for the opportunities. I'm not saying it's you, but a lot of the coaches that I worked for, and they never really progressed their macro understanding, their communication, their ability to kind of develop their theory of the game. And if you are like stagnant as a coach, you're not going to go anywhere. And so even if you did get the opportunity, like let's say you got lucky, you got the connection, you wouldn't deserve it and it wouldn't feel the same way. So I would just encourage you to consistently push yourself in every single aspect of your coaching quality, and then simultaneously make sure that you're reaching out to other teams and always pushing yourself circumstantially. Make sense?
Yeah.
It's
That's
much
all I
harder
got.
for
Thank
it's
you
harder
so
for
much.
coaches than it is for players. I will say it's much harder for coaches than it is for players. It's much trickier. So good luck. That's perfect timing. But appreciate you. We love that.
Hello?
Welcome. Hello.
Hello. Thank you for the seminar, Spilo.
Of course.
So here's my question.
Mhm.
Right now, my team is really focusing on communication. That's pre-fight plans, ult tracking,
Yeah.
and like 3-2-1s.
Mhm.
And I'm a strong believer in like chunk-based learning, just like focusing on one thing at a time, like hyper focusing. But I do have like a little bit of doubt in my mind. Like my players will get some bad habits in other areas that we're not focusing on, like positioning or angles.
Mhm.
Is that something I'm just going to have to deal with, or
Yes. Yes.
yeah.
The good news is that you're unlikely, if you're being intentional and you're cycling new concepts and working on new things, you're actually unlikely that you're actually building bad habits. It's probably not happening. They're actually probably just falling back on old bad habits, if that makes you feel any better.
Okay.
So you're not detraining your team. It's more likely that they just actually don't really have strong off-angle fundamentals yet. And so that while you're working on communication, they're going to fall back on things that are more comfortable for them. And if those things aren't exceptional positioning, it's not the end of the world. It's fine. It's fine. We can address that later.
Thank you. That was all.
Yeah, of course. No worries.
All right, so we have 2 typed out questions now.
Let's
One
do it.
is kind of combining Christopher's seminar with yours. Do you think NA's problem is a lack of understanding / execution of wide push-pull, or that they don't play characters to their strengths nearly as well as the other regions?
I just think NA's problems are a little bit overblown. Personally, I think that like they've performed fine as of like the last year or so. They've definitely developed a lot as a region, not just in terms of like their execution of macro concepts, but also their individual player mechanical quality. I think the gap is definitely closed. I think that the development system within collegiate has definitely improved a great deal since then, and I think that like, overall the region, now that American Tornado's like tarnished black mark has passed away, that we actually have some developing players that are actually doing a phenomenal job. So I think with that disclaimer aside, I think there isn't really a problem with NA. They're just kind of mediocre at a lot of different things. I think that their macro understanding still has a ways to go. I think that their understanding of I think when we talk about like push pull, really what we're talking about is just strong fight planning, like anticipating layers, whether it's using, and to be honest, EU has always, I felt like, done a pretty good job of that, even without Lucio's speed boost. So I don't even like correlating with push pull, but like really, really strong fight planning, shot calling, and then like strong dive angle, whatever, strong hero pools within Tracer. But to be honest with you, I think looking at like NA's most recent performance, I think we had a little bit of lights were too bright for sure. But I think that like the big thing here is it's really just one event, and I think NA has done a fine job besides that. So for my feedback for NA, it's really not, we need to change how we're thinking. We need to pick up our own. No, just keep doing what you're doing. Keep doing what you're doing. Keep learning new characters. I think if you look at even the whole concept of like NA needs to develop its own style, I think it's just kind of stupid, because if you think about what happened in China, right? Was it Liquid? No. Who was it? Who was the team that beat did really well? Is it Geeke? I honestly can't remember. Regardless, whatever the case may be, you had them playing dive mirrors with Kiri, Lucio, Hazard, Nightmare, right? And that's their own style. Like they approach dive with their own variation with the character that's more new, Hazard, right? So that the gap between high-level Hazards, I think, is a lot closer. They're not going to go play Winston. They're going to play characters they're strong at. They're going to play their own Kiri, Lucio, more short-range angle, less wide angle, better ult layering variation with characters that they can perform on. I think Freya has definitely been a character that I think that the gap between Freya's isn't as large as it has been with other hitscan characters. So basically, my TLDR is that I think NA just needs to keep doing what they're doing. Keep training their macro fundamentals. Learn how to fight plan more like EU. Keep playing to your strengths. I think that they've gotten a little bit unlucky meta-wise, where I think the criticism that they tend to play, they have not developed their own hero strengths is maybe true when the meta dice roll just busts the crap out of Symmetra, right? But to be honest with you, like we could have also seen the same thing happen with Hazard, right? Like all of a sudden Hazard, Lucio are just like god heroes, and then maybe NA actually performs well. And then now we're sitting there asking, why aren't EU teams picking up Hazard as well as the NA teams? So I don't know. I think that like NA just needs to keep doing what they're doing. Their macro understanding has definitely been better. I think when I was watching some of the matches, I saw a lot of angling. I just saw a lot of those angles just getting mechanically destroyed. And I think like, I mean, I hate to throw my guy under the bus, but Zero, for example, just looked like a plat player sometimes. And I think that that's not because Zero is a bad player. I just think nerves, match pressure, could be that maybe, Proper's getting more support. But yeah, TLR NA just needs to keep doing what they're doing. I don't think they need to reinvent the wheel. Learn from both regions, sure. Just keep up the good work.
As a main support, I find it very difficult to develop tempo within ranked for various reasons.
Sure.
What skills are more practical to develop in a ranked versus scrim setting?
Yeah, so by tempo, we'll define it as like synchronizing your aggression with your tank line. Obviously, in ranked, like it could be a little bit more blurry about like when we're actually taking initiation, so when you should press your advantage. When you're playing support in ranked, and you're playing any character in ranked, you just need to focus on like where are the angles that make sense with the character that I'm playing, and just really focus on your mechanics. Like I think like there are not enough support players out there that work on their mechanics in scrims or ranked. You just need to hit every whip, you need to hit every boop, you need to hit your shots, you need to move wall ride like Funny Astro on crack cocaine, you need to hit every orb, you need to hit like when you go and play ranked, you need to angle yourself perfectly and then hit every single shot. And that's really all ranked is all about here. So if you're trying to win in ranked, just practice in ranked. Like you just need your reps in ranked, because mechanics is like such an underrated aspect of Overwatch from all sides, that you just can't afford not to be good mechanic and play well in scrims. So I highly recommend playing mechanically focused Overwatch in ranked. That doesn't mean inting, but that means like positioning yourself well and just hitting every single shot.
You've talked many times before about quality of practice. How to get even more out of your practice hours through consistent breaks, activity, and clear goals for the session. Have you learned anything new about this since your previous video, and are you planning to make another video on this soon?
Great question. I mean, the obvious low-hanging fruit, as you said, the breaks, going in with set specific goals, as we talked about. Don't say work on my mechanics, say work on my, primary fire aim, or work on my boop timing, or work on my wall riding, or work on my Genji shuriken, or whatever. So you go in with specific goals. You make sure you're getting enough sleep. Make sure that you're using caffeine wisely. So I don't recommend caffeine every day, but a little bit of coffee 3 or 4 times a week is great. That can also help bring some intensity to practice. But one thing that I would probably add here that I wouldn't say is new, but something that I think is worth mentioning, is that I think novelty helps a lot. So one of the questions that I get a lot of times just from the average like silver players, like how do I know when I should change when I'm practicing, when I should do something new? And the answer is that you don't. The only real answer is, when are you bored? Because if you're bored, you're not practicing. And I know that that's a bit of a spicy take here, but if you're bored, you're not bringing enough intensity to the table, and so that you should probably mix it up. And I think a lot of coaches get caught in this trap where they've got this like old school football coach mindset where we're going to yell and we're going to run the play until it's done right? And unfortunately, that's just really hard to do in Overwatch, to kind of force that level of strictness. And the reality is that you shouldn't probably do that to yourself. The reality is that you should probably be changing what you're working up, mixing up what you're working on when the boredom sets in. So for you, it might be work on your angles, work on your positioning, work on your cooldown management. And then when things you're just not feeling very engaged in what you're doing, either that's it for practice for the day, or allow yourself to work on something that's productive but more engaging with what you're doing. Just work on your aim, work on your mechanics, wall ride, just whatever, just mix it up. And I see this from like team coaches as well. Like, we can work on fight playing and communication until the cows come home. But I actually really don't recommend working on fight playing and communication for an entire scrim block. It's just too boring. It's too many team fights where that's going to be boring. Instead, we should be working on, fight playing, team communication for a couple of maps. Maybe the maps where the layering aspect is a lot more important, and then maps where we can kind of double down on just flanking and angling and opening wide and support splits. We work on that, and then another one we just work on trying a brand new composition. But like, you just have to keep variety, not because this is the TikTok generation and everybody just has to stay entertained all the time, but because if you're not engaged in what you're doing, you're not really practicing.
Right. After testing Vendetta more, what do you think her playstyle/playstyles are?
Sure. So it's basically the same thing, like the same thing from my initial playtest review. Nothing's really changed. Short range off angles, verticality, unpredictability, and then just more sustain. So the difference between Vendetta and some of the other characters is that she just has more staying power with the angle that she's on because of her block and because of her HP. So that doesn't mean that you can't get bursted down or you can't burst down other people. Absolutely. But the difference between, let's say, Tracer Genji, there's a lot more movement and mobility in how they hold an angle. For Vendetta, it's just a little bit more passive, controlling space and going for cycles. And I think Vendetta is very much a tempo character, and the fact that she has bursts in value, right? Like you have slightly longer cooldowns, like your shift, your swing, your sword toss, that allows you to have these spikes in pressure. But I think, when you're down those cooldowns, when you're down a little bit of your block resource, you can't really provide as much value. Whereas you look at like a Genji Tracer, Genji without deflect can still hold space. A Tracer without recall can still hold space. A Vendetta without resources can't really hold space, and those resources take a little bit longer time. So, hold angles, go for cycles of pressure, disengage, hold cycles of pressure, disengage, and that's basically it.
How should a shot caller communicate win conditions simply without overloading the team?
Layering, right? Always layers. Like the example I talked about earlier is start with the pancake, right? Start with the pancake. So one of the last things I did with London is we was the Jotes meta, and I basically did a lot of talk on layering and lasagna and just ult layering, right, within the Junker Queen Goats meta at the mirror at the time. And we talked about how, using ult for ult for ult for ult for ult, right? And at that point in time, when you're working with a high level team, you might go 3 or 4 ults and like, we're going to use this, 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 and we're going to win with this. Wow, it's incredible, right? And even at that level, things go wrong. But when you're starting about like fight planning and whatever, you're not going to be able to reach that. So I kind of encourage you to think back to that Shambhala Monastery example with that Sigma, where we said, just get your lane with Nano Diva and watch out for Kitsune Rush, because those are the easiest and most obvious ultimates to worry about. That's basically all there is. Basically all there is. So when you're talking about fight planning, just think about like what's the simplest ultimate to set up and use just easily. Usually it's an ultimate that you can close the gap with or provides consistent pressure. Juno ult, Kitsune Rush, Primal Rage, Nano. I'm trying to think here. Bob, very consistent opener ultimate. Anything that you can consistently stage with. And then you need to think about what can the enemy team easily stage and use as well. And then that's basically it. Like if you just start with the pancake and you just consistently nail the pancake, but you die to Pulse Bomb or you die to Diva Bomb or you forgot about that second support ult, honestly, that's fine. That's a really good starting point.
Right. I think the next question is kind of similar. When does good communication reduce team performance by overloading shared attention?
Can they elaborate on what shared attention means? We can move on to the next question in the meantime.
Okay.
We'll come back to that one. I just want to make sure I understand what shared attention means. I think I understand what they're saying, but I want to make sure.
Coming back into coaching and trying to focus on fundamentals, is that a good thing? And when trying to build a 4.3K team, especially relationship-wise, is it worth giving each one of my players a separate goal to work towards?
Sure. One of the problems with giving separate goals in scrims is that it's really easy to focus on team performance in scrims. So when I'm giving separate goals, I usually give them sparingly, only to a couple players, and usually goals that are very easy to replicate in the team environment. So for example, one of the really easy low-hanging fruits I used to work on with Sparker during the Soldier meta was communicating his angles. That's basically all we didn't work on. We didn't work on Helix use or healing station use or anything mechanical. It was just basically the really easy fundamentals and something that complemented what the team was already trying to do. One of the challenges and this is something that I had to learn, is like if you give everybody an individual goal, you're gonna completely lose the script, and then people are gonna lose faith in their practice. So I would never say we're gonna work on Reinhardt's shield management, we're gonna work on Soldier Helix rocket placement, we're gonna work on Baptiste shift timing, we're gonna work on Lucio plus 20 my off angle with Soldier, and then you get what I'm saying? It's just too complicated, too many moving parts. So what I encourage players to do is I will have scrim blocks or maps where players can work on individual mechanics, and then if that's what we're doing for that map, then the team goals are much more generic and much more fundamental. If we're working on a very complicated or very brain-intensive team goal, then I don't want any individual goals. I want all of us working on that one team goal. So the challenge of a coach is to be able to not stagnate individual progress, but not to forget about the obviously basic big fundamentals as well. And like finding the balance there between like not overloading information is really hard, because especially when you have teams that really want to like win scrims and hate losing maps, it's like really, really hard to kind of manage that without like diluting practice quality. I see Froggy's answered here. The limited pool of cognitive bandwidth that a team is collectively trying to point at the same thing at the same time. So like what matters, right, or what should everyone be aware of? Intermediate coordination. Okay, so give me the starting question one more time from Froggy. Now that I understand what Froggy's talking about, I forget what the first part was. Might be buried. Sorry.
Give me like 3 seconds.
Take your time. Take your time.
When does good communication reduce team performance by overloading shared attention?
I see what you're saying. Okay, so shared attention is basically as in like when there are multiple different things that a team has to worry about, how can communication compromise that? Because now we're having to communicate while also paying attention. So when it comes to communication, I think the big thing is that like the difference is that you're speaking and you're listening, right? So listening should be probably a priority for everybody, but the ability to tune out noise is the big thing here. So like when my tracer player is on the flank dueling their tracer, if my Ryan says ram no form, or my Ram says ram no form or ram no vortex, my tracer player needs to hear that and then not listen to that, because it has zero impact on what their responsibility is. However, if my Lucio player on the angle with Ram hears ram no vortex or sees ram no vortex, then that directly influences what my Lucio player may or may not do in that situation. So when it comes to communication and limited bandwidth, the big thing is to first off simplify what you're calling. Most teams that I have worked with under-prepare, under-communicate between fights, and over-communicate during fights. And you can see the problem here, where there's not enough preparation in terms of what we're going to be doing before the fight starts, when we have plenty of bandwidth to focus on thinking about what we're going to do. And then over-communication, over-clutter, over-crap, when we should really just be focusing on hitting our shots and using our CDs. So what I would recommend most teams to put attention to, especially coaches, is making sure that their team is putting as much of their mental bandwidth, their mana, spending all their money between fights. And then when fight starts, it's actually really important that you're focusing on simplifying what's being said and cutting out the noise. Cutting out the noise. There are teams that I've worked with that I've actually had to ask them to stop calling cooldowns. Not stuff like Suzu or Vortex or whatever, but like, we don't care if tracers use a blink, or we don't care if Genji's use deflect. I'm not saying that those things don't matter at all, but a lot of times teams overemphasize those little details and then they miss the forest or the trees, right? We're not executing our fight plan, or we're not focusing on our mechanics. So I guess what I would say is, when we're talking about communication, is there's a clear hierarchy of like, we needed to have a fight plan, we needed to get our timing, and we needed to call, where we're angling. And then besides that, the other stuff just doesn't matter as much. Hope that makes sense.
As a flex DPS player, I sometimes find it challenging to enter a ranked game or scrim environment with a clear goal for improvement and deliberate practice. In certain scenarios, I feel like having regressed. When playing, it occasionally seems like the skills have practiced are not actually translated into my gameplay, leading to a feeling of regression. Do you have any tips for improving a player's mental state and mindset while playing the game?
I mean, it's a pretty broad question, so I'll give it a pretty broad answer. You need a coach, or you need to be able to self-review yourself more consistently. A lot of that, this is why people pay me money, and Chris money, and Hadi and Commander X and other coaches out there. It's like it pays to have somebody from an objective perspective give you a set of specific habits that you consistently need to break, or new habits that need to be made, and give you those guidelines. And doing that as an individual player can be challenging, and that takes a lot of time and a lot of self-awareness. So you could start with doing reviews of yourself once or twice a week. But once you have those goals and once you have the feedback, the difference between good players and players that are stagnating is generally less the concepts that they need to work on and more of the intensity with which that concept is being applied. Most players do not know how to practice effectively. I've had to do a lot of videos on this, but oftentimes when I live coach somebody, and we'll be like, let's say, working on their, mechanics. Let's just not say angles for once, right? So they're working on their mechanics. We'll say smoothly aiming your crosshair on the target's head. it's really funny going into a live coaching session in just a random crappy old ranked game, and I'm literally doing nothing, the entire thing, but saying smooth, smooth, right? Just remember smooth. And finishing that game, and you can just hear the exhaustion. You can hear the exhaustion in a good way. Like they're like, holy crap, like that took so much out of me to give like that level of intensity for that long, right? And when you have felt that level of provocation internally on yourself, just forcing yourself to stay, not just staying locked in, but to stay locked in with a specific direction. Cheers, Jess. It really, you start to understand how you can't help but getting better. Because if you play even just an hour or hour or two with games like that, you are going to get better. You're commanding your brain to grow, right? And that is something that most people cannot bring to the table in terms of practice. And so you have to find a way to do that. I think, again, this is where coaches can help a lot, but this is where there's videos out there like League of Legends timer videos that go off every 3 or 4 minutes. A little bell goes off and reminds you to stay intense with what you're doing. This is why sleep matters. This is why taking measured breaks matters a lot. This is why turning off even team chat and voice matters a lot, because I do not have any brainwaves to listen to, Joe Schmo 42069 yelling about how we should be swapping to Roadhog. You know what I'm saying? And so like you need everything. You need every brain power going in there. So being able to do that, you have to want to do it. You have to enjoy doing it. You have to feel like doing it. And if you're worried about, I regress on some skills when I'm working on other skills, I think that was part of the other question. You really can't worry about that, because if you're worrying about regressing at another skill while you're practicing another skill, then you're not really focusing on the other skill. Like I'm so focused on what I'm doing, I'm not even aware of the other autopilot aspects that I'm doing. And that's not easy to do, but that if you want to be great at the game, that's what's demanded.
How would you plan what to work on in a scrim? How focused and flexible should it be? And is it realistic to manage this while also being a player?
So choosing what to work on during a scrim is, the first thing that matters the most, and this is where I really struggled early on in my coaching career, because a lot of my scrim goals were very much like matchup focused. So if the scrim partner would show up playing some random comp that I had not prepared for, a lot of our feedback would just kind of go out the window, which really sucked. So one of the things I encourage you to do is like to go in with specific goals that it doesn't really matter what you're playing versus, like whether it's like fight planning, angle, like calling lanes, better tempo, whatever else. And then if you do get a matchup that you just wanted reps versus and you can work on micro stuff, then you can absolutely prepare stuff. And you can also prepare and adjust on the fly. I think the key thing, as I said here as well, is like when you're scrimmaging is being flexible with what's being seen. So like, let's say you go in with an ult planning goal, and then you end up playing versus like a team that's just like pocketing their Doomfist crack addict, and he's just going insane in your backline, and the fight planning is going down the toilet, and we have to pivot to like heavily marking his angles. Like let's bail on the fight planning. For the rest of scrim block, let's just focus on like just really controlling space versus this Doomfist and denying him every single angle. And that's fine, because one of the things that you have to understand is that players are very emotional. And so if they have lost faith in what they're practicing because they're a little bit infantile and can't lose a scrim block, then honestly, you have to bend a little bit. You don't baby your players necessarily, but if you have to change the pivot a little bit to make the practice a little bit easier to focus on, a little bit more rewarding, then that's absolutely fine. Now, if you have a really, really strong, mature team that's willing to just take it on the chin over and over and over again, then you can stand by your fundamentals, but you can't die with your ship. So if your team is like really losing faith or getting really distracted and you have to pivot a little bit, then you absolutely can change what you're pivoting or what you're working with a little bit. I will say, in a side note, this is a bit of a hot take, but I think that one of the things that I wish I had done in my career more is call scrim blocks early. I think that like if your team is just not bringing the level of performance or the level of effort with practice, I would rather get blacklisted by a team because we constantly cancel scrims. than to continue to practice there. And that may be a bit of a hot take, but I value high quality practice so much that I am willing to call a practice an hour earlier, because if we're not practicing, then there's no point scrimmaging at all. And I think that is something that I think might be good at getting your players' attention as well. But that's kind of a side note, maybe something for another time.
Right. This next question, I don't know if I fully understand. Maybe you do. As Diva, I never really go into prep for my backline.
As a Diva, I never really go into prep for my backline. I mean, I assume it's just kind of about controlling lanes or controlling space. When you're thinking with Diva, again, as I already said, Diva, I think there's like this concept that like Diva in Overwatch 1 was like this peel bot, but really what Diva did is she controlled angles, space control, and more often than not, she was usually in angles that are closer to her tank. So she usually actually enabled her tank to take space off of her space and then controlled space afterwards. I worked with Molfig with this a lot back in late 2021. So when you're talking about like prepping for your backline, which I'm assuming this question is, it's really more about proactively denying angles and lanes that would be a problem for your backline later. That's basically what it is, because you're just this big unkillable bulk. And so the problem with 5v5 tank, as a lot of 66ers point out, is that a lane that is controlled by a tank is oftentimes very difficult to clear out as a DPS. And so that means that as a backliner, if my diva is controlling a lane, it's very unlikely that there's going to be a threat coming from that lane directly for me. So it kind of narrows down my attention, narrows down my focus. The other thing as well is that a lot of the dive DPS are shorter range. Genji, Diva is also shorter range. So a lot of the times the lane that those flankers want to take to access backline is also the lane that Diva wants to control. And so that can make things very difficult for providing pressure on backline. So yeah, it's a much more proactive style of peeling.
How do you avoid turning players into dependent thinkers?
Okay, so this is something that is definitely, I think I disagree a lot with other coaches on. So I am a systems coach in the way that I see the game, but I really do not like being a micromanager. Now, I say this as somebody that has very strong opinions about the game and the way it should be played, but I did this with London in 2021, and we had a lot of success, despite it not always looking like it on the scoreboard. With what I would do is I preached angles. I preached fight planning over and over and over again when I joined, like just religiously, like grinded at them, over and over and over again. But then, as the player competency at understanding the way that I saw the game grew, I started to democratize, that's a word I think, the responsibilities, and I would actually have player-led VOD reviews. So what I would do is I'd say, this is the fundamentals, we train. I would work with each player very closely so I understood their understanding of the game and their understanding of like whether they were at the level that I needed them to be. And when I perceive them to be understanding the game well enough to make me happy, I would actually let them take responsibility. So what I would do is I would say, okay, Hadi, you understand off angles. Kelix, you understand map control. You understand the fight planning of what we need to be doing better. I need you to prepare a second point Temple of Anubis hold for us tomorrow. Good luck. And what I would do is, now I still was doing the preparation on the side, right? I was not just giving away work and then not doing it on my own. I was also preparing my own thoughts because I wanted to be able to see if their opinions, their feedback. But basically what you did is these are the guys, they're the ones that have to act in game, not you. This is the big difference between Overwatch and real sports, is that I think the better analogy is probably like soccer, like European football, because in American football, a coach can literally micromanage literally every single piece of the chessboard with breaks in between. In Overwatch, you can't do that. In Overwatch, you need players that are not only strong mechanically, but are strong fundamentally and can make these live time adjustments. Everyone's got a plan to get hit in the mouth. And so the problem that I see with a lot of these like planned out teams with coaches that are definitely too domineering in terms of like the micromanaging, is that if anything unexpected happens or even like match nerves shows up, they really don't understand Overwatch. They just follow a system. And system players are not good Overwatch players. With obviously a few exceptions. I'm kind of speaking in absolutes. But generally, it's better to have players with strong basic fundamentals and that are very good at the characters that they're playing. And so when you as a coach are training your players, really as the competency level of the players increases, the more responsibility that you give them. Now, the crucial thing is that they have to have the competency, but they're not going to be able to grow that competency if you don't give that responsibility. That's just simple good leadership fundamentals. So as my players got better understanding things like fight planning and got better understanding things like angles, they got more and more responsibility to come up with their own way of playing and seeing the game. And not only that, but VOD reviews got to be a lot more democratic, where I'd say, this is the way that this should be played. What do you guys think? And there was a lot more back and forth, but the players had to earn that. The players have to earn that. And until they demonstrate that level of understanding, then they haven't earned that. So what would often happen is, like, let's just give an example here, is let's say double flex, Winston dive. I talk about, this is why we're doing a split with our Ana Zenyatta. This is why we're pocketing Tracer. This is what our ult layering looks like. We spend a few weeks, a few days scrimmaging that. And then we start doing play reviews. And then I start doing these one-on-ones and be like, okay, what do you think is the best fight play? What's the best angle here? And then we start to kind of open things up. But I think a lot of, like I said, you can't have system players perform in Overwatch. I know a lot of teams have had mixed success with that, but that's why teams like TM have been so successful, is because their quote-unquote system is the player. It's Yui, right? If Twisted Mind had a coach and he was trying to install that level of system, I think the success would be a lot more mixed, if that makes sense. Cheers, Task Force. Always good to see you, mate. Thank you, Calmet. Speaker?
Hello?
Hello.
Hello? Okay, it's me again.
Welcome.
I wanted to ask something that might reveal a slight insecurity of mine that I don't show
okay.
many people, but I feel like a lot of people can reflect with this.
Sure. I respect that.
My question is regarding mental, basically.
Yes.
I have found myself, and probably many others have found themselves repeatedly having bad negative headspaces, not necessarily because of loser queue, but maybe because of some external factors that they cannot control. And I don't want to sound like a 10-year-old, but I will sound like one. Being an Overwatch Pro play has been a childhood dream of mine. And at times, I have felt that one possibility is that, I just might not make it. And throughout my life, and again, hopefully other people relate with this, I've had multiple moments where I've had this self-doubt, and I was wondering if you can maybe share some kind of experience that you've had where you've overcome this, because you have had tremendous success. From my perspective, I don't know if I'm wrong. I don't think I am.
I think so, but I've also had some tremendous failure as well. So, but yes, continue.
I don't know about the tremendous failures. I'm sorry.
You didn't know me in 2019, but or 2020, but I respect that. I appreciate it. Continue.
So my question is basically, I'm going to try to be as straightforward with this as possible. How do you deal with the fear of not making it?
Okay, so I'm gonna.
Have you had an experience where you've dealt with that?
Yes, I mean, it's a phenomenal question. I also appreciate the transparency and the honesty, and I think that, like, you would be surprised at the number of people just in this voice call that feel the same way, and myself has felt that many times. So you are not alone in that front, and this is where you're probably not going to make it. You're probably not going to make it. Like, I'm just going to be straight up with you. You're probably not going to make it. You're probably going to fail, and the reason why that's the case is because it's not just a reflection of you as an individual, but also due to, your opportunity, luck, your abilities, your talent as an individual with your life experience prior to this. Like, I was unlucky with Overwatch League coaching because I was extremely late to Overwatch. Like, I did not even start playing until Overwatch League had already basically started. I had no first-person shooter experience, but I was also lucky that I had a lot of coaching experience. But then I got really unlucky with opportunities. But then I got really lucky that, basically, like, things line up and things don't line up. But the reality is it's just statistics. You're not likely to make it. So when you think about failure, okay, I want to think two things here. Number one, don't look at success and failure as a binary system. By far the most important thing. Because when you think about success or failure as that I made it or I didn't make it, you're screwing yourself over and you're being very juvenile with the way that you approach things. So let me ask you a question. Do you think that I succeeded by reaching Overwatch League?
I think that is a question with multiple answers
Sure.
depending on the
Sure.
person answering
Sure.
them.
So I succeeded,
so
but I joined
some-
a team that was 0-8 and only won 1 game. Right? Like, we could have won
Right, yeah.
2 games. We also could have beaten Toronto Defiant that year as well. We came very close to beating them, who were a very good team that year. So that could have been a massive success. But I also kind of failed because we did not dramatically improve when I showed up, despite I feel like the impact that I had. I felt like I did a good job, but it didn't show in the results. So did I succeed or fail? What about next season? We did much better, but budget cuts. I'm the remote jackass. Guess who gets cut to pick up Khan? Me. So am I the success for that team, or am I the failure? You know what I'm saying?
Wait, can you repeat that? I don't understand what you meant. Somebody has to get cut. What?
So with London, I was the guy that got cut to pick up Khan. Part of the budget cuts that Cloud9 went up through to the 2022 season. I'm the guy that got cut. So am I a failure?
Should I be hanged for not knowing who Khan is?
No, that's okay. You shouldn't. Basically, yeah, that's okay. That's good. My point being is that I succeeded to Overwatch the League, but I'm not walking away with a championship. You know what I'm saying? I didn't even have a head coach position. I had hopes of being a head coach at one point. I don't know if I actually would have enjoyed that process at that level, but did I succeed or fail? Well, it's not that simple, right? People want to look at things like that simple. Am I a successful content creator right now? I mean, I don't know. I'm like minuscule compared to the top 20 content creators. You know what I'm saying? Minuscule. I'm a nobody, right? But I'm a success based off of what I wanted to do, right? So for you, it's just like...
You reach your own goals.
Right. So for you, it's just like you might have a lofty dream, right? A dream of winning OWCS, right? Are you likely to achieve that goal? No. Are you likely to achieve top 4 in OWCS? No. Are you likely to achieve top 16? No. Are you likely to even find an OWCS team? Well, maybe, but probably still no. Are you likely to reach tier 3? Possibly, yeah. And you see, it's a gradient, right? It's a gradient. Every step that there's more likely, but there's also a chance. But what the reason why that's so important is because a measure of success is still success, right?
I see.
And you may not have the opportunity or even the desire to sacrifice what's necessary to achieve your dream, but it doesn't mean that you actually had success. It doesn't mean that you necessarily failed. You just found a measure. Like right now, I do not really pursue professional team coaching anymore. Doesn't mean I'm not capable of course not, right? But I just don't want to. I don't want to make those sacrifices anymore. So am I a failure as a coach? No, I'm just not pursuing that success. So for you, the reason why this matters is that success is a gradient. Is that you cannot look at yourself as a failure because you did not achieve your dream. And you also, this is maybe the most important thing of all, you cannot waste the time, training, and talent that you are training right now by taking what you're doing right now for granted, right? Are you developing yourself with what you're doing and what you're aiming for right now?
I don't believe I have I don't think I have a clear answer to that.
Yeah, that's a great answer. But that is a question that you should be answering.
I don't know.
You should contemplate that question. You should contemplate that question because this is the question. The one binary yes or no question is with where you're at right now, with the gradient of success that you're working towards, with the dream that you have. If you fail of reaching that dream, 30% of the ladder, 40% of the ladder, 50% of the ladder, 10% of the ladder, 99% of the ladder, will you feel like you still walked away from this experience satisfied that you have developed and learned something? And if the answer is yes, then it is a binary success. It is yes. And if the answer is no, then you are a failure. Do you understand?
I see. Yes. I would also like to ask a follow-up question.
Of course.
Is that this doesn't need to apply to everybody in the call, but many people, I believe, at least in this generation, have been raised in such a way where they are being pushed in a direction that is somewhat against their will, and this is, I think, seen pretty commonly in the world, not just in the Overwatch sphere, where you are being told by outside factors and people, you need to be the best in XYZ, and
Yes.
If not, then you can go screw yourself.
We live in an
But
outlier world where it's very easy
yeah,
to just we're confronted every day with freaks of nature through YouTube and
yeah,
TikTok. Like everybody's a specialist. Yes, continue.
yeah. My question is, see, I have lived in this kind of household, and
Mm-hmm.
I have been somewhat shunned for having this goal of mine.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe for better or worse, I cannot say for sure.
Mm-hmm.
However, you have mentioned earlier that the question of success is not binary,
Yes.
but these kinds of people like me treat it as a binary question.
Yes.
And how would you help us, how should I say, recover from that mindset? How should
Absolutely.
we how can we turn that into a gradient where we can be more content with ourselves
Yes.
and not feel like not be just a bunch of
I understand.
depressed grunts.
I understand exactly what you mean. It's very difficult to break that cycle, especially if that's something that you've been trained up into with the culture or the community that you were in, and that can be a very difficult thing to deal with. If you actually look at some of the most successful people in the world, a lot of those people grew up in very, very miserable, very high-pressure households that drove them to be successful, but ultimately led them to be failures because they're just generally very unhappy and very awkward people.
They're
I think
drained of
they're
everything.
drained, right? Their entire purpose is that one thing, and so they don't live very fulfilling lives. I think Michael Jordan's a great example of a very strange, miserable person in many ways, and that's not something that you should want to be. It doesn't mean that excellence always comes at you being a toxic person. I think if you're talking about reaching the top echelons of anything, you could probably do that in a very healthy manner, but oftentimes it's very challenging to do so. And no matter what you do, if you want to be excellent, you have to make sacrifices. You have to make sacrifices. The question is, how far do you want to go?
Yeah.
So the question then is if I'm kind of trying to explore these different avenues and maybe I'm not achieving the top echelon, how do I stop myself from this cycle of self-loathing or judgment or frustration that I'm not doing that? Is that correct?
Yeah, because and I also want to add, I also feel like that is also disrupting my performance in a team environment because
Yes.
I would notice multiple times, I would tell myself, I would, for example, let my ego take over on Genji, and I would go
Yes.
for a one-shot clip, and I would immediately fumble, and I would be like,
Yes.
"Holy fuck, I'm so
Yes.
R-word." I don't know if I can say that here,
Yes.
and I'll be like, "I'm so sorry, please, I fucked up. Holy shit, this, that," and I just go into that self-loathing process,
Yes.
not just with life in
Yes.
general, but it
I understand.
impacts my environment.
I understand. I
Yeah.
understand. The way to look, I want to encourage you with this. The way to look at that is that it's an incredibly difficult thing to train, but it's also incredibly rewarding. So you have to remember that if you're not going to fix that problem ever, but you can significantly improve it and strengthen your character so that it becomes less of a problem. And that if it takes
So
immense effort, if it takes immense effort to provoke that change, it will be worth it. You understand? So let me just clarify that first, okay? There's no solution here. There's no magic pill here. It's like saying, how do I become less tilted? Well, you got to train your habits better. You got to train it. It's going to take forever, right? You're going to have a tendency. You don't break that tendency. You train yourself to be stronger and better at dealing with those disadvantages because that is a disadvantage and you're going to have to deal with it. There's a couple of things here first. First off, you got to make sure that you're going into every training session with intent that is separate from your performance.
can you elaborate on that? How
When you
should my intent be separate from my performance?
when I said don't practice your positioning, practicing your off angling, that's what you do.
Uh-huh.
So your intent is not on my performance. The intent is on what is my next angle. You understand? The intent is
I
not
see.
how are my mechanics. The intent is, am I slowing down my mechanics? Am I not flicking? You understand?
Uh-huh. I
You
see.
and
I see.
and you need to surround yourself with people, if possible. This is maybe the most important thing. You need to surround yourself with people that you are able to train and play with, that are able to complement that energy without tearing you down. So if you're in a community that really, like, think about like the where you grew up, right, with it constantly pushing, tearing you down, very, very high energy. If you need to surround yourself with players that are able to mirror that energy from you, and that don't encourage that negative feedback cycle. You understand?
I see. I believe I found that with my current team.
Then that's
and
excellent.
I want to ask something, and this might be a question that we cannot give an answer to here right now. But you've mentioned surrounding yourself with like-minded people on the internet. That is relatively easy. However, real life still exists.
Yes,
And
correct.
there are a lot of factors that I don't want to reveal here and I don't want to get into
Of course,
at all.
that's okay.
But my question is, because some of these factors are obviously unchangeable, how would you go about blocking them out? Have you ever had that kind of negative feedback that you just could not get rid of in a very effective way? And if so, how do you just work around it? It's not getting rid of it, it's just working around it so it has as minuscule effect as possible,
I
like
understand.
you mentioned earlier.
I understand. Buy a good pair of headphones. No, I'm kidding. No, I mean
Sorry.
that's a very difficult,
torn.
very difficult situation to put yourself into, and honestly, to the extent that you have dealt with it, I have not. So I am sympathetic, but you are obviously dealing with maybe a pair of ankle weights that maybe that I have never dealt with. So that shows a great deal of personal strength from you to be able to pursue what you're doing right now. So first things first, right? You need the like-minded people to encourage you and support you. It makes it a lot easier when you're able to deal with that stuff. The other thing too, as well, is you need to believe in your mission. You need to believe in your mission. So a lot of people struggle with negativity when they don't have a clear direction with where they're going. How many times have you heard or seen these motivational stories of so-and-so had all these criticisms and all these feedback, but they stuck and they believed it and they made it, right? And so for you, one thing that might help with you a lot is, as I said here, don't look at your success and failure from a binary perspective. Ask yourself, what's your mission? Do you believe in your mission? Why are you doing this? Like, what is the goal here? What's the end? Not just the end goal of I'm going to go WCS, but like, let's say that doesn't work. What will you have taken out of this? And if you really reflect with the way that you're approaching things and what you're doing, and you're like, okay, it may not work out, but I'm going to develop and improve myself, and I'm developing these meaningful relationships, and I'm working on a routine and a schedule, and I'm challenging myself, then you will have a lot more confidence in your approach, because you know that your approach has meaning even if you don't succeed professionally at that level. You understand?
Even though I don't reach the end goal, I still take something out of it that I can implement.
That is correct.
In something
and when you can look
down.
at yourself and you know that's the case, it's much easier to deal with the negativity because you have absolute confidence in that your mission is meaningful, even if it's not success. See, I used to get mad. People,
Lulu, basically.
Right. So I had a lot of moments where, like, you know, I'm thinking about like the money that I'm making from like the coaching and from the professional coaching and from like a lot of what I'm doing. And I'm like, man, I am making no money. Like, it's awkward telling people that I'm a video games coach, but I have had such confidence in my ability to talk and communicate and work with people in a meaningful manner that I had a lot more confidence in my mission, despite maybe not having the best supporting crew. Right now, it was nothing compared to what you have, of course. But if you are confident in your mission,
sorry to interrupt.
So as in, I knew what I am doing had meaning. It had meaning,
okay. And
I believed in what I was doing, whether it was going to put numbers on my Liquipedia or put numbers on my YouTube subscribers. So I not only loved what I was doing, but it had meaning, and so therefore it was a lot more easy for me to be confident in what I'm doing, despite the external factors. That's what I'm asking from you. What's your meaning? What's your purpose? Without a vision, the people perish, right? So what's your vision for yourself, right? Like, why are you doing this, right? If you don't make it all the way, what will you learn from this, right?
I see.
And then maybe more of like some concrete examples, and this is probably not something that you can, I'm not really sure what your situation is, and so I will just speak vaguely, and I don't ask you to clarify. It's very personal.
Appreciate that.
However, one thing I will say is that autonomy and independence goes a long way. So if you are in a toxic environment, it might be worth sacrificing some of your convenience for a bit of autonomy and independence. That might be an end goal. That might be an end goal. That would be a bit of feedback for you, because when you're in that environment, let's put it this way: you can fertilize the flower. Yeah, it might be better to fertilize the flower a little bit less, but to not beat it with a hammer every day. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Maybe it's better if there's a little less beatings. So that's kind of my point here: is do what you can on that front. And if you're like, well, there's nothing I can do right now, well, what about a year from now? What's the end goal? What's the plan? Right? Where can we move towards that, right? So I appreciate your honesty, and I also appreciate your humility here. That takes a lot of guts, and I don't think I'd have the guts to do that. So mad respect to you.
Thank you. I just have one
course.
last question
Of course.
regarding this topic. It's regarding your confidence in the middle of high intensity situations. Concretely speaking, Overwatch team fights, right? And okay, wait, let me take a step back. Sorry.
Take your time.
I have found myself, at least I've noticed a pattern through my upbringing that I would start achieving my goals. Okay, sorry, not achieving my goals, but seeing very noticeable improvement, at least regarding Overwatch or whatever I was doing, after some sort of immense hardship. However, after those hardships, my mental is down under. And I have been asking the question myself, okay, so wait, is the secret to success, like what you mentioned before, just being a depressed fuck inside? And how do I break that cycle? Because I want to succeed in this. However, I don't want to sacrifice my sanity.
Correct.
Because I feel like I've gone a long way with sacrificing my sanity, and I'm on D. I don't want to go for it.
I understand. I understand. I mean, a lot of it kind of comes when things are going poorly. You have nothing but to pour that angst and energy into whatever that you can succeed in and whatever you can control.
But how do I rely on other sources of energy and positively use them?
Sure, you train it. You train it. You build.
Okay.
You talked about you're with a team right now that is positive and you enjoy spending time with. That's a great first start. We talked about developing specific and personal goals for your gameplay that are uncorrelated with your performance. That's another good start. We talked about an honest self-evaluation of the practice that you're doing, whether you succeed or whether you don't. You're not on the end of a hook here, and if you let go, you're going to fall to your death. If you fail as an Overwatch player, you'll be fine. You'll be okay, right? But maybe you don't feel like that because you haven't thought about, well, what's the alternative, or what am I developing right now? Like when you're fighting to survive, the only thing that you're going to do is survive. But you've already clarified that that's not the type of stasis that you want to be in. You want to be somebody that is doing this because you love it, not because you feel like you have another choice. And to me, that begs the question of like, where is your reflection going? What is the purpose beyond this besides pass or fail? You know, if your life is meaningless if you don't succeed here, then I think you need to think a little bit harder about what your life actually means. Nobody's in dire straits like that, right? So that probably is why it has driven you to success, because it really was everything matters here. I have to succeed, but you've kind of seen that that's not a very healthy mind state to be in. So I think Chris put it best when he said that people really only reach top Overwatch when they really just like playing the game.
Yeah,
you know,
when they genuinely love what they're doing.
Right. Short-term success comes from frantic energy, but you cannot maintain ambition through pure pain. You cannot. It burns bright, but it burns out quick. Pure rage and anger is gonna work, but it doesn't last. It doesn't last.
Yeah.
It's not sustainable.
Yeah. All right. Well,
good luck,
if anybody
mate.
else had questions, I apologize for taking too much of his time.
That's okay.
But,
That's okay. I remember I said this is what I like to do. Right. This is what I love. So you take your time. I appreciate your honesty and your courage.
Thank you, and I'm also glad you liked the promotional video.
It was amazing. It was phenomenal work. And also, I will say this for being a degenerate Overwatch nobody, you're a freaking cracked editor. That was crazy. So you were maybe more multi-talented than you think.
You should... Okay, wait. Mal, I'm sorry. You should see my other videos, by the way.
Hey, maybe you're multi-talented. All right.
Okay, once again, thank you.
You're very welcome.
This means a lot more than you think.
Of course. Hello.
All right. So yeah, I had two quick questions. First of all, what's your Chipotle order?
My Chipotle orders. So my Chipotle order is like, I'm gluten free, so it's like super generic. I'm just gonna like put all like the good Mexican ingredients in a bowl, a little extra guac, a little extra rice, a little bit extra salsa. Let's put it this way: it just can't be dry. You get what I'm saying? It just can't be dry.
No, I get that. Okay, that's fire. Okay, now the actual question. So how would you go about sending players off to kind of, study on their own
Yep.
after VODs? I feel like with my higher tier teams, it's a little bit easier because they can understand it more. But
Yep.
when dealing with teams that are a little bit lower, like I say, like advanced division and below, it's kind of
Yeah.
difficult to say, look at this content, consume this content, and it's like I'd have
Right.
to guide them through it.
That's correct. That's
So
correct.
is there any like how would you I guess like send the students home to work on stuff on their own?
Sure. So kind of going back to what I was saying earlier, where like competency matches their responsibility. So individual responsibility is only matched by their ability to process what's being said. So basically, a good example of this is how I will go into an individual VOD review with a silver Juno player, and we'll talk about angles, we'll talk about positions, and so on, and then I'll kind of comfortably ease them into kind of telling them what I look for and see, it worked there. Okay, it didn't work there. And then as the review goes along, I'm starting to ask more and more questions. Where should you be? Where should you be? What do you think about that cooldowns? And they could see that they've built a bit of understanding. They've built a bit of competence and a bit of confidence. And then as they start to get better at it, then they can kind of go off on their own. So in your example there, like let's say that your tracer player's not very good at taking angles. Let's just give it a stupid example, right? So what we do is you talk down, you sit down with a player, you go over a little bit of a little bit of review. We talk about positioning and so on. You start to kind of ask them, where do you think here? What do you think here? And then you don't go say, go watch some VOD reviews or go watch yourself play. You say, I want you to go watch 2 maps from our recent scrim. And I want you to look at your angles. And I want you to give me a scoring grade, 1 out of 10, 1 through 5, whatever, on how quality, not how good you did on macro or micro or mechanical, just how good were you at staging on your angles on that map and then the next map. Give me a number score. Message me and tell me why you gave the score. And so what you do is you give them a theme, something very specific that they're looking at. We're not looking at broad principles here. A very specific thing, something that you've already establish that they have at least some competence on, and then you're keeping it engaging and interesting for them by asking them to do something with that information. So not just saying, what did you think of your angles? Write a 1,000-word paragraph on. No, but give them a number score. Do something fun, right? Have them send a screenshot of like the worst angle that they took on that map or the best angle that they took on that map, right? And then, we can reevaluate, we can talk again, and we go from there. Alternatively, you're working with a Lucio player and ult layering, right? And we talk about it, we review it, and then go, okay, I want you to go watch some Chio POVs. I want you to watch 2 maps, and I want you to tell me, I want you to find the best beat that Chio did, and I want you to find the worst beat that Chio did on each of those maps and send it to me. And you almost gamify it, and you get them engaged. You give them a specific direction. Don't make it vague. Don't make it, to get them engaged in what they're doing, and have them give a specific answer, and have them actively engaged in what they're doing. And this is obviously from the standpoint of that they have a little bit of competence in that because you've talked with them about it. Now, if they come back to you and they get it wrong, that's fine. Go back, reevaluate it, talk it out, see where they came from, why they gave this score. Like, let's say they thought that this beat was bad, and we can talk about it, but then we go back and we start it again. That's kind of what you have to do. You have to meet them where they're at. You have to give them very specific types of study for them to work on. And then also, if they're wrong, at least they're trying, right? They're trying. They'll develop, right? So
That's fair. Okay, got it. Yeah, that's all. I appreciate that. Thank you.
of course. Hey, Gio.
All right. Froggy had a follow-up
Uh-huh.
to their previous question.
Uh-huh.
How do you prevent players from becoming dependent players, so having them to have critical thinking without having to be handheld?
Well, you've trained them that way. Like, you've trained them to be that way. So you can definitely have players that come in with that tendency from previous experience, or maybe just like personality. Like, it's not everyone's an alpha Chad, and that's fine. But if you have a consistent problem with players that don't take responsibility, don't step up, that's probably because you made them that way and you've allowed your system to go that way. So the kind of like what I was just saying with theirs, it's like, well, you got to meet them where they're at. You got to start shifting responsibility way up to their competency. It might be a little bit uncomfortable, it might be a little bit awkward, but whether it's in reviews or matches or scrims, but if you have to allow them, force them to be able to take leadership. I think most people by default tend to act in the way that they think is best. And so it's actually more of a learned behavior to not do that. Most people kind of just, even random bronze rank players, they're just going to do what they think is best. They're not going to ask people for advice. So if you have players that are dependent upon others or what you were saying, then you've trained them to kind of become that way. And so you need to start giving them agency and giving them leadership over their own decisions up to what they can handle, and you need to do it now. Now, as I said, you don't throw them into the deep end. You give them, a little bit, like for example, like maybe your maybe they don't know, they're scared about fight planning, but you give them agency over off angling. Okay, where do you want to angle? And I think for a lot of players, it's a confidence thing. Like I've worked with a lot of support players that have like very, very little confidence in their ability to read the situation, the position. So we'll start with a team review, talk about the angling, and then I will continually put them under pressure in the review. It'd be like, where should you be? Where should you be? Where should you be? Where should you be? And force them to kind of step up to the plate. There's a little bit awkward, a little bit uncomfortable, a little bit of nerves. And then this is the important part. When they nail it, throw a party. So, wow, yep, that's it. See, I knew you were confident. Like, look, you always know where to go. Then why aren't you doing that in game? If you screw it up, who cares? Like, we're not going to flame you for it. You go out there and explore it. You absolutely. And then what you do is you say, dang, maybe I can do this, right? And then you get them in that training environment, and yeah, they're gonna die. They're gonna screw up stuff up. But you never, ever flame them for trying to kind of flex their baby wings and falling flat on. You just continually positively and reinforce. Nice job. You allow that environment where they're willing to try and kind of learn new things. And because if you ever go in that environment and you slam them down or you criticize, you provide not even like negatively, just like no, we need to just be positive. Just let them go. And once they their competence and their confidence kind of grows a little bit, we can kind of go back and try to sharpen them up a little bit. But yeah, it's not a binary fix, right? It's not like you flip a switch and all of a sudden you got confident, autonomous players. It's something that you have to train. It's something you have to start small. You have to start slow, and you got to build the confidence in the players by showing them that they can handle this. And so we're going to continue to grow them.
Hello again.
Hello.
Two-part question. And I'm asking for a friend who is too scared to come up here and ask you.
That's okay. I'm a scary guy. I'm huge, 6 foot. I was at 6'7", but I can't say that anymore nowadays. The brain rot.
So can you elaborate what a system player is?
Yes.
And then can you also explain how to get out of being a system player?
Yeah, so a system player is somebody that basically just follows a pattern and doesn't think about the situation critically. A system player is somebody that always takes the same angle, does the same position, and does the same fight plan. Basically, the difference between, I would say, a system and a fundamental player is a fundamental player understands the basic workings of Overwatch and is willing to change depending on the situation. A system player is just basically, they just take the same action without thinking about the situation critically. The way to develop a player into being able to think more critically is the same way that when we were talking earlier about like what's the difference between an angle and a position. The difference between an angle and position is that an angle, working on your angles is just a more specific aspect of what you're working on. So if you're trying to work on not being a system player, you need to ask yourself, how do I know I'm a systems player? And in what ways is my system player being too much of a system player, right? I kind of gave a couple examples there where like you're not thinking about your angle critically, you're not thinking about how to use your ultimate critically, you're following the set pattern. But I guess it starts with how do you know you're a system player? And what decisions are being autopiloted that probably shouldn't be autopiloted? And if you can answer that question, well, then you know what you need to think more critically about. So let me give you an example. Let's just do the one I said there. Lucio. I always beat engage. Always beat engage. I just always beat engage. And well, your goal for this scrim block is to ask yourself, is there a different way that I could use beat in this fight? Should I use beat engage? What about this? And that's going to slow down and clunkify your thinking process. Okay, great. Nice job. Like your performance might be a little bit worse, but you have to have a system or a community that's going to be comfortable with a slight dip in performance as you're starting to actually think critically about the decisions that you normally always took for granted, but be comfortable with trying something a little bit different, trying something a little bit new. So you kind of have to force yourself to step outside your comfort zone. Now, crucially here, again, we have to be specific with what we're trying to desystemize. Ultimately, when you're performing in a match, you really are just wanting to perform on autopilot. You're wanting to perform on systems. That's why Chris has always talked about, a lot of the Brawl coaches talk about it's easier to play a system composition in a match because you don't have to think critically. You just have to follow the order of operations. So what we're really trying to do is when you're a systems player, it's not that autopiloted actions are bad. They are very good. It's that you probably need to revisit your systems and decide if there's a way to upgrade your system. So when you're a systems player, that's not a bad thing. It just might mean that there's a blind spot with how you're approaching the game. And when you're practicing, you need to be willing to take a look at those blind spots and see if you can try something different or new. Being a systems player is not a bad thing necessarily if the system is perfect. The problem with most system players
never is.
Yeah, right. So that's the real question, right? So you gotta rip the roots out and replant. You gotta rip the roots out and replant. You gotta reevaluate. And so that the real problem with system player is that they're a system player in practice. When in reality, in practice, you should be a lot more
Open
experimental, right? More cognizant, more cognitive, engaged, trying, experimenting, and so on. Now, obviously, there are not. I think Capitology released a video recently where he talks about like how EU is very system focused, even in scrims. Like they're always trying to play to win the scrims. They're not really experimenting a lot, and that works really good in short term situations. And I think that's good. But like if you ever are trying to develop a new hero or new hero pool, or you have time to practice, you really should be okay with kind of trying different things, trying new things, breaking patterns just to see what happens. That's how development happens.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm. TLER is just be willing to make mistakes, right? Be comfortable, have the confidence to be able to make mistakes, and yeah, easier said than done.
Well, yeah, I think that basically wraps up all the questions that we've had.
Sure. Okay. Well, that was a lot. I appreciate you guys for all being here. I loved being here. I always love doing this kind of stuff, and I kind of an open offer. I don't answer messages too often, about once a week usually, and obviously with holidays might be a bit slower. But if questions do come up in the future, you can just message me directly, and I do take questions from randoms. I just might not get back right away, but. Thank you very much to the Element guys for setting this all up, and thank you guys for all being here. Appreciate you guys very much.